Just for your information in the public, if you are listening through washingtoncity.org/meetings, we have Councilman Staley and Councilman Ward are excused, and Councilman Coates may need to be excused. So we're just going to move forward as we can. I've invited Melanie Olson to take just a couple of minutes and talk about the Arts Council and what's coming up with an invitation for all of us. So.
Okay, I just came from the Red Cliff Gallery in St. George. We just finished setting our first art show.
Oh, excuse me. Hold on, Melanie. I need to make a motion to approve the agenda. Or can I? Can I approve the agenda? Well, okay, we'll just go. Thank you.
Okay, so we just finished setting our first art exhibition at the Red Cliff Gallery in St. George. And we have over 20 artists, and they all live here in St. George that are participating in this show. And we've got over 75 works of art on display, and a variety from stained glass. We've got some horseshoe art. We've got several ceramicists, and then we've got all the mediums of paint and pencils and photography. It's just a huge variety of beautiful art. So I am here to personally invite you to come and see what the RAP tax is doing for the artists in Washington. So I brought you each an invitation.
Thank you. We'll make sure the other councilmen get them, okay?
And Thad and Kenny already have theirs.
Yes. It's off Tabernacle. It's right across from the parking structure.
Oh, it's next to Capoletti's?
Isn't that the one? Oh, it's the one up on the,
So the Red Cliff Gallery is, do you know where the police station is in St. George? As you go up the hill to the bluff? It's right across the street
north,
from the
right.
police
That's
station.
the old
It's in a city office
courthouse.
building, city commons building, and we're in the commons area of that building.
okay, thank you for that.
So it's right as you come in the door. They've got a nice little plaza out front with, winding trails and all kinds of
Right,
greenery and statues, yeah.
So that's the old courthouse. Yeah.
Apparently it is the old courthouse according to Ivy. Okay.
Yep.
Good. Okay.
Thank you, Melanie.
So that's all I
It's
wanted to
been
do.
the art gallery ever
Do
since
you
I
have,
lived here.
yeah, the show is on Friday. It's Friday from 6 to 8. The artists will be there. We're going to have live entertainment. We've got a string trio, three Dixie College students playing string trio. And then we will have refreshments. And so it'll be a beautiful night with art and music, and can't ask for any more. Come and see
Good
see
date
it for yourself. Yeah, cheap date. Cheap, classy date.
Yeah, that's all right.
Yeah, so do you guys have any questions for me?
No, this looks great.
Okay,
So I'm excited
yep,
to
come and see, and then if you've got any other questions, we'll be there. Welcome to answer your questions, okay? And there'll
Thank you
be
so much. Yeah.
20 artists and their families, yeah, so
good.
you'll be good to go. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, Melanie. Okay, we'll move on to item 2.
Okay, Mayor and Council, really the presentation on 2 and 3 that Mark will do here, they're kind of intertwined. So, but first, there's 3 documents that were in your packet: the impact fee facilities plan, the impact fee study, and then the rate study. And I'm going to touch base real quick on the impact fee facilities plan, and then I'll introduce Mark with UFS and have him do his presentation remotely. The impact fee facilities plan is basically a subset of the capital facilities plan that was approved in February of this year. And primarily obviously deals with projects related to the impact fee. There's a table, I believe it's on page 13 at the end, that shows of the overall projects, what ones qualify for impact fee and what percentage. So I don't know if you have any questions on that particular document. Like I say, we spent a fair amount of time when we did the bigger plan, but you need to pull that out, and is what Mark used to develop his study from there.
So Rick, when I was at the UAMPS conference earlier last month, they were talking about having a yearly fee increase that would kind of absorb some of the good years for the years where, so there wasn't too big of a increase. Is this take into any consideration of that?
No, the impact fee, I think they were probably mostly that recommendation, I would assume, was probably directed more towards rates itself.
And this is infrastructure, right?
Yeah, and this would be on the impact fee side. And I think, Mark, are you on? Did you hear that question? And maybe
Yeah, I'm on.
you could include that maybe in your presentation, and when he gets to the rate side, and then maybe we could look at that just in a little more detail.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question. I'll cover that.
Okay, and so I want to introduce Mark Bichamp, who's with Utility Financial Solutions, who's done previous studies for the city. It worked really nice to have Mark and his team. You know, they had our previous data, we added to it, and he was able to do both of these studies together. And so with that, I'll just turn the time over to Mark, and we'll go from there.
All right. Well, thank you, Rick. My name is Mark Bosch. I'm president of Utility Financial Solutions, and we've done the cost of service studies, financial projection studies for Washington City for several years now. And
recording in progress.
A little over a year ago, we started the electric cost of service review, which includes review of the financial projection and certain key financial targets related to things like, are you meeting debt coverage requirements? Do you have adequate cash reserves? Are you achieving or getting close to your target operating income? We also looked at the cost of service study. Now, what a cost of service study does is, as part of the financial projections, we identify what's called the ideal revenue requirements of the utility. And when I say revenue requirements, what I mean is how much money should be recovered from customers through the rates that we're charging. And what the cost of service study does is it takes those revenue requirements and identifies who's causing those costs. In other words, if your system peaks at 6 or 7 o'clock in the evening on July 22nd, who's using that power that creates those demands that you have to pay those capacity costs for? And it allocates the cost to each of the different customer classes to try to help ensure that the rates that you're charging are properly recovering the cost and you don't have cross subsidization. And you're going to see the cost of service study results look pretty good. Now, I want to just start by saying overall, the electric utility looks very financially stable and financially sound. And we're not proposing any rate adjustments. And you'll see that as I go through. Now, part of that, which kind of helps, hopefully this will help answer the question. Normally, we do recommend some sort of smaller annual type increases to try to minimize rate impacts on customers. But what's happened with Washington City is because of your growth, you're getting additional what's called contribution margin to cover fixed infrastructure cost. And that growth is offsetting any cost increases, more than offsetting it. And, we're projecting about 3.5% annual growth rates. That's what you've experienced over the last couple of years. And so that's built into our projection, which is part of the reason why we're not recommending any rate adjustments. And you'll see that as I go through the projection. Now, the other part of the study that we did is to look at what the impact fee should be for new customers when they come onto your system. To handle the new growth, we're having to make investments in what I call backbone infrastructure. So we looked at what those investments are for that are impact related. And we look at what a typical customer at certain levels, so what's called amperage, creates the demands that they create in that infrastructure. that's causing those investments. And then we're allocating those to set or establish the appropriate impact fees. Now, as I go through, please stop and ask any questions as I go through my presentation. Now, whenever we build a financial model, and we looked out 5 years, actually the model goes out like 20 years, but what you're going to see is a 5-year model. And when we build it and we look into the future, we have to build it based on assumptions, as to how costs are going to change, like the annual inflation rate. Typically it's been 2.2%. Currently, it's been running upwards of 5%. It's projected to come back in line. Honestly, inflation doesn't have a major impact on your cost structure. Most of your cost structures are driven on power supply cost. That's about 70 to 80% of the electric department's cost. Then the growth rates, and these came from UAMPS. We're looking at in excess of 3% annual growth rates each year. Southern Utah is an area that's growing substantially. The other studies that we've done in your area, we've seen similar growth rates that are projected, and even in other places like in Heber City, we're seeing similar growth rates. Now, power supply cost between 21 and 25, we're looking at 3% annual power supply cost changes. Now, I want to say something that's probably going to sound kind of funny, but the power supply cost change really doesn't affect your projections. And the reason it doesn't is back several years ago, we put in place what was called a power cost adjustment. So as power supply costs change, those automatically get picked up through that power cost adjustment mechanism. So even though it's built into our modeling, it doesn't affect our financial results. And then there's the capital improvement plan, what we're looking at that needs to be funded from the rates. So that's over on the right-hand side. We're looking at, do this here. We're looking at anywhere from $1 million capital improvement plan for the next 4 years. And then in 2025, we're looking at about $4.4 million expenditure. So those are the assumptions that we've used in building our financial modeling. Now, I'm going to go through the next 3 slides and talk about our 3 key financial targets. There's a lot of targets we look at, but these are the key ones. One of them is debt coverage ratio. When you issue debt, you issue what's called revenue bonds. And revenue bonds come with bond covenants. In other words, you have to maintain certain coverage ratios as a result of that bond ordinance. And if you fall below those bond covenants, you're in technical default on the debt. Now, most bond covenants require like a 1.2 coverage ratio. And all that coverage ratio means is we look at the cash that's generated from your operations and we divide it by your debt service payments. That ratio is your debt coverage ratio. And we're calculating out the debt coverage ratios to be in excess of 3 times coverage. Your bond ordinance requires about 1.2, and we add a safety factor. So our minimum target on that is 1.4. So when we look at the debt coverage ratio, we're in really solid position with debt coverage ratios in excess of 3 times. So that looks really good. Then we have the minimum cash reserve. What we're doing here is we're looking at how much cash the utility needs to maintain in reserves at a minimum. And the reason we have to identify that is because there's a working capital lag, which is a timing difference between when you pay a bill and get money from customers. To give you an example of that, you may go all through the month of January paying for labor, materials, supplies, and say you have one billing cycle. At the end of the month, you read all the meters, and first week of February, you send out the bills. You don't get that money from customers until the 2nd or 3rd week of March. Excuse me. So we look at what that working capital lag is between when you paid the bills and get the money from customers. And any utility that bills on a monthly basis, it's usually about 45 days. So we look at your working capital leg on your O&M, on your purchase power cost. I'm going to come back to historical rate base in a moment. We look at your largest debt service payment. We want that in reserves, and also your capital improvement program. We want to make sure that you have the funds available to start and complete your capital improvement programs in any given year. Now, I'm going to come back to the historical rate base. What that is a recognition that bad things happen to our infrastructure, unexpected events. And it could be an ice storm, a windstorm, a hurricane if you're in Florida. It could be a transformer just kind of unexpectedly just, ceasing, not working anymore. Now, in your situation, you have what we call a newer infrastructure. And because you have a newer infrastructure, we feel that you have less exposure to bad things happening to it, like a catastrophic type event, as compared to like an older infrastructure. We feel there's more unexpected events that can occur. So we assigned Washington City the lowest risk factor when it comes to unexpected events. So when we quantified your minimum cash reserve level, which is down here at the bottom, it calculated out to about $5 million minimum cash. When we look at your actual cash reserve balances, you're running about $8 to $8.5 million. It isn't until 2025 that starts to drop off to 6.8 million. And that happens because we had that large $4.4 million capital expenditure. So from a cash reserve standpoint, you're in very good position. And so that's not driving any need for any rate increases. Then we look at the target operating income. Now, target operating income is a different way of looking at your financials. It's looking at it more like an accountant would look at it. So we look at fully funding things like depreciation expense and something called the inflationary increase in the assets replacement cost. So for example, if you put $1 million asset in service with a 20-year life, and if you only charge depreciation expense at the end of 20 years, you have theoretically recovered $1 million. But when you go to replace the asset, it's going to cost you more than that because every year the replacement cost of the asset goes up. So we use the inflation rate. We actually use the Handy-Whitman index to identify those cost increases. And the target operating income, which we consider an upper boundary, is about $1.2, $1.3 million. Now you're running below that at about 600,000, but that's our upper boundary. So that's not a target per se. We want to get close to it. We don't want your operating income to fall negative, but we don't necessarily want it to exceed that target operating income. So what we do is we establish a boundary in a sense. We identify the minimum, which is minimum cash reserves, minimum debt coverage ratio. We have to set rates high enough to achieve those minimums. But then we have an upper boundary called the target operating income. And when we set a rate track for a utility, we try to keep them in between those two. All right. So when we put it all together with no rate adjustments, debt coverage ratio is in good shape. Your cash reserves is staying above the minimums. And your adjusted operating income is pretty stable at about $600,000, $700,000. Even though it's not at the target operating income, we're within that ratio. So because of this, and we're not recommending any rate increases or decreases. And what's helping us to prevent that rate increases is because of the growth that's occurring in the system. And of course, the growth is going to generate additional revenues through those impact fees. So before I go on, this is actually one of the key slides in my presentation. And I want to make sure or see if there's any questions associated with the financial projection.
Yeah, I have a question about the jump in 2025. Is that some infrastructure that we're anticipating that we're going to have to build in 4 years? Oh, it's the substation.
Yeah, that's the substation 8, and in fact, based on what's going on, that may be accelerate up.
Okay,
So,
thanks.
Is there any other questions or concerns?
I don't have really a concern, but just maybe a question. So when you prepare an impact plan analysis, it's guided a lot or somewhat by state statute. And so just for our citizens that may be listening in, these are done by state statute and probably by some city ordinance, I would think. I don't know for sure on that, but would you just talk about that just so it adds another level of confidence in that this has great oversight. It's not just your company or yourself or your great expertise that's analyzing it, but there's other factors involved in it as well.
Is correct. The state of Utah has certain provisions with respect to the establishment of impact fees, and it looks at what costs are going to be incurred over a certain period of time, 5 years, sometimes 10 years, and it looks at how much of that is associated, how much of that capital expenditure is associated or to serve growth. And then using that, we then look at, for every type of customer that's added at different amperage levels, how much are they contributing to the backbone? So for example, if you have, you have a sub-transmission facility and substations, and those substations are added or enlarged because of growth in the system. So what we do is we look at, okay, how much, when you add a residential customer with a 200 amp service, for example, how much are they contributing to the what's called demands or capacity on that needs on that substation? And so that's what identifies or determines what those impact fees are. Now, we also make an adjustment. When we first identify what that impact is, we also identify when you add a new customer and the rates that they're paying contains certain components. One of them is a recovery of distribution infrastructure, which we call contribution margin. So in other words, growth is benefiting the system or the existing ratepayers. So what we do is we take a portion of that contribution margin and we offset those impact fees by that benefit that the system is getting also. So that's helping to keep the impact fees basically at a level that's probably more indicative of the true impacts that the customers are creating. I hope that answered the question. I know I got into a bit of detail.
It really did. I appreciate that. And I may have more questions, but I can ask Rick or reach out going forward. So, but it did. Thank you.
All right, perfect. Now the other part of the study, the most important part of a study that we do is the financial projection. But the other part of it that we look at is how much it costs to provide service to each class, which, like for residential, it costs us about 10.6 million. And we compare that to how much revenue we're projected to receive from the class. In this case, it's 10.1 million. So in theory, for this class to fully meet that target operating income, we would need a 5% increase. We're not recommending that because that's our upper boundary, so to speak. So the cost of service study is identifying how much it costs to provide service to each class, compares it to the projected revenue, to identify theoretically how much rates would need to change for each class to fully meet its cost of service requirement. Now, when I look at this, I want to look at a couple of different things. One is this number down here. See that 4.6%? That would be the theoretical rate increase to meet that target operating income. And again, we're not recommending that. But then we look at like the residential service. It says 5.3, very close to the average. So that tells me that the residential service rates are set to recover their cost, or close to their cost. And when we look at all of your rate classes, all of your major rate classes right here, they're actually very close. There's not a utility in the country that charges 100% cost of service based rates. Because your costs change every year. And so you wouldn't be able to. So what you try to do is get within like a plus or minus 10%. And what I mean by that is if I see somebody that shows a need for a 14% rate increase in this example, or maybe a 6 or 7% rate decrease outside of those boundaries, then I probably want to do something to pull them back in to get them closer to cost of service. In your case, all of your rates are within that boundary. So there's not really a need to really even tweak the rates because they're all pretty close. The only one, the furthest one off is steel structures. It's a very small rate class. And even that is within the boundary, 12.5%. The upper boundary would be about 14, 15%. So now this is the first part of the cost of service study, is to identify this. The second part is buried within your rates is a fixed monthly customer charge. That facilities charge or that monthly customer charge is there. It's not a very well understood charge, but it's there to recover certain components of your system. To give you an example of that, when you have a customer on your system, that customer has to have a meter, and the utility had to install that meter, had the cost to install that meter. They also have the responsibility to repair it. They have to replace it if it goes bad. Every month they have to read that meter. They have to send the customer a bill, and they also have a service drop to go into the customer's facilities. Those are fixed costs that do not vary based on consumption. So even if the customer doesn't use any energy, we still have those costs to serve that were made specifically for that customer. Now, that part of it is not controversial. There's another piece to the that can be controversial, and that is that home still needs to have a wire that runs from the substation to the home. Without that wire, we cannot deliver electricity. So the question then becomes, how much of that wire should be allocated into the customer charge, and how much should be recovered through the usage component? And when we do a cost of service study, we do what's called a minimum system analysis. And what a minimum system analysis is it says, how much would it cost to build a distribution infrastructure if every customer only used 1 kilowatt hour of electricity? That cost gets allocated into this fixed monthly customer charge. And the obviously customers don't use 1 kilowatt hour, they use more, causing the infrastructure to be more expensive. That amount gets rolled into the usage component and is charged to customers through rates. So that's what a monthly customer charge is. Now, in your situation, back several years ago, that customer charge for residential was established at $16.50. The cost of service day says it should be closer to $14. So it actually showed a rate decrease. So what I'm proposing by not changing rates or not recommending any rate changes is to allow that fixed monthly customer charge to catch up. In other words, the cost to catch up to the current rates. And so all your other customer charges are relatively close. Your large customer is off by $18, but that's such a small charge compared to the size of the customer. that we don't feel it's necessary to go through a rate change to put these more in line. So hopefully the council agrees with our assessment of why we're not recommending any rate changes for the electric department at this time.
I will think they like that very much, that there's no rate increase. So just one question, when you were talking about the wire, which is really transmission, is that from our facility to the home, or is it the grid?
It's from your facility.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. So is there any other questions about the monthly charge?
Doesn't sound like it. Thanks, Mark.
I want to just talk briefly about the power cost adjustment. You know, we established this, I think, around 2016, 2015. And what a power cost adjustment is your power supply costs go up and they go down. You have very little control over it. And most utilities, I'd probably say better than 75% of the utilities, electric utilities in the country, have this mechanism in place that any changes plus or minus that occurs in power supply costs get passed on to customers. And when we establish that, I think a power cost adjustment is one of the best things a utility can have. But there's also it has to be controlled. And what I mean by that is the power supply cost can fluctuate substantially on a month-to-month basis. So what we put in place was what we call a 12-month rolling average. What that means is rather than just looking at 1 month of power supply costs and changing it in the subsequent month, we look at the power supply cost changes over the previous 12 months. So if power supply costs go up substantially 1 month or down, it doesn't have a dramatic impact immediately on your charges to customers. We'll recover it, but we'll recover it slowly over the next 12-month period. So that was a mechanism that we put in place about 6-7 years ago. Now, one of the things that happened recently is that the power supply costs in Utah in general, in southern Utah, they really went up substantially this past summer. And to the point where that power cost adjustment would have popped, in other words, gone up quite a bit. But what happened is over the course of the past 6 years, because we're using that rolling average, there's a certain amount of, it's not an exact calculation. In other words, there's the difference between it goes up or down in any given month is, so in some months we over recovered in a sense, other months we under recovered because the billing units don't always happen at the same time the power supply costs do. So we had a little over $1 million built up in that power cost adjustment account. So what that meant is when the power supply cost increased this past summer, we took a portion of that excess and we credited it against the power cost adjustment to try to minimize the impacts on customers. So we periodically true that up. And so you keep track of that under or over recovery on a month-to-month basis. And like I said, we use some of that to offset some of the increases in power costs this past month, during the summer, I mean. Now, obviously, we can do that, but if power supply costs continue high, eventually we're going to have to pass that on to customers. But I just want to give you a heads up that we did use some of the excess, if you want to call it rate stabilization, it's not really what it is, but you can call it that. That was built up through that power cost adjustment mechanism. And we passed some of that on to customers to help stabilize that power cost adjustment calculation. So is there any questions about the power cost adjustment?
No, I just have a quick question. I'm looking at the customer cost graph that shows the different costs to the customer. But as far as the power supply cost breakdown, when you consider purchasing the power and the transmission, what percentage would the transmission be in relation to the cost of the power?
I can get you that. I don't know specifically
You know what? I
it
don't
is.
need an exact. Is it like 10% or 5 or just?
I would say it's probably in the neighborhood of about 20 to 25%.
Hey, thank you. That's all I need. That's all I need.
And we can confirm that because I'm just, I'm, I've calculated that for other utilities, but I didn't look at yours specifically.
Thank you.
All right. So now the impact fees. I talked about these earlier. And basically, we look at how much the infrastructure is going to be added to handle additional growth. And we also looked at, over the past 7-8 years, when it was established several years ago, we actually under recovered on our impact fees, but so that got rolled into it also. So in other words, the impact fees, if you were to do it a mathematical formula, would be the cost of the additional capacity that we're adding, plus the under recovery that's currently existed from previous investments, minus the benefit that new customers bring to the system. And that difference then becomes the impact fees. And obviously we don't do that on a specific customer by customer basis. But what we do is we set it up fairly accurately based on, like, for a residential home, they have different amperage levels. Most customers are 100 amp, a lot of them are 200 amp services. And so like a 200 amp service, your current impact fee is about $2,449. We're proposing this go to $2,773. We also did a survey, and not that I recommend ever setting rates based on surveys, but it is something that I know that people like to look at. And your impact fees compared to other utilities in southern Utah are pretty much in line with other utilities in your area. You're not the highest, you're not the lowest, you're more in the middle. And so what we're proposing is, or the calculations where they came out, is that the impact fees should go up about 13% for the residentials. So new residentials, their impact fees would rise by 13%. Now, this doesn't affect any of your existing ratepayers. It's only new customers that this impacts. So, and it's a modest adjustment. You're talking about $250, $300 for a typical residential home would be the additional charge on the impact fees. And we did that for the residential. We also did it for the commercial. Now, the commercial actually calculated out lower, 4% lower. So like if you were to take a 200 amp commercial service, you're currently charging $4,625. The new charge would be $4,439. And I think a lot of this is driven because we did a very detailed analysis, not just looking at the impacts, but we also looked at the benefits. And I think historically, the benefit part was never looked at. So, and I think that's what's causing some of these variations, but they're not substantial. But the residentials need to go up 13% and the commercials down 4%.
Do we have to reduce them?
I think by state law, and I'm not an attorney, but I'd probably recommend that you reduce them because I don't think that you can charge more than what the impact fee calculations are.
Yeah, that's correct. You can charge less, but you can't charge more.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, and this is just different amp service, like you have different types of voltage requirements for residential, commercial. So in a nutshell, though, if you look at all of these slides, all the residentials will go up 13% and all the commercials will go down 4%. So, Then we had a special service, which is a 60 amp service, actually goes down 9%. There's very small, few customers that would qualify for that. So is there any questions about, so the only thing that I'm proposing is the changes in the impact fees. No changes associated with the rates themselves. Is there any questions or anything I can do to help answer anything?
The only other comment I have is just, this was presented to the power board to let you know the last 2 months, and they concurred with the recommendations, or recommend to the council to proceed with what's recommended here.
Well, Rick, the one thing I noticed, it's just one more reason why Washington's such a great place for business. Right?
And if you, in your packet, you did have that comparison table, and you'll find on the residential, we're actually quite a bit lower than everyone but Hurricane. They elected to not establish their impact fees on the full 100%. They're only 75% recovery. And this is one area we're actually lower than Dixie, which is really nice.
Yeah, we're well below the average in residential 200 amp and about at the commercial 200 amp. So that's good.
Thank you. Any additional questions from council? Does that take care of items 2 and 3?
Yes, yeah. And so if you don't have any more questions, we'll let Mark drop off and enjoy
Thank
his
you,
evening.
Mark.
Yeah, thanks, Mark.
All right, thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. We'll go back to item 1 now that I've got a threesome here that I can ask for the approval of this agenda.
Mayor, I'll give the approval for our workshop agenda.
Thank you.
Second by Coates.
All in favor? Aye. Thank you, gentlemen. Okay, we'll move on to our discussion and review, item 4, public safety impact fee facilities plan impact fee analysis. Chief Evans.
Good evening. We're going to turn this over to Joe from Sunrise. Hopefully you got all the information in the packet. I just want to preface this on his behalf. We appreciate him stepping in. Steve actually put the study together with John. Steve's no longer with Sunrise, but John is sick. And Joe was gracious enough to come over to still go through that tonight. So he may not have all the ins and outs, but he spent some time and went through it. And I believe he'll obviously be able to answer the questions pretty straightforward as far as ours go, compared to the last one especially. So hopefully get you through that one.
Rick, are you going to take that?
I concur.
Well, thanks, Chief. That's right. Joe Phillips with Sunrise. I think I know everybody on the council and have for quite some time. Appreciate your business with Sunrise. We've been together for a long, long time. If I could get that first slide. So this is the public safety impact fee analysis presentation. And like Chief was saying, John Jacobson has been the one that's kind of carried that forward since Steve Hall came over here and worked for the city there. And Dustin Schaefer would normally fill in behind John as he's been Washington's primary contact over our office for a long time. He's up in Salt Lake, so you've got the C team today. Sorry, Roger. But I do have some experience with impact fee facilities plans, and I'm reasonably familiar with this one. What you have currently is the impact fee plan from 2014. We often, and almost every time in the plans that we prepare, we recommend a 5-year review on them, and then if growth happens faster, then we button that up a little tighter, and if it's a little bit of slower growth, then we'll recommend it, and if the conditions haven't changed, then it can be extended out a little bit. But as a result of that 2014 plan and some of the prior discussions that were involved in that plan, you came out of there with a new police station. I believe that was 2015 is when that was built. When we think about updating a plan, we're always, we want to ask the question, why are we doing this? What is our purpose and need? And it's pretty basic purpose with this one. Things have changed so much in the last time that when we started this plan in 2019, it was at that 5-year window. And there was a need to update it for current population and growth projections, as well as characteristics of the community and needs. The scope of the plan is focused on fire and police, although other public safety impact fee plans can include some other elements, but this one focused on that. And in discussions with the city at the time, we had established a 10-year planning horizon is probably an appropriate horizon for this particular study. Next slide. So as far as the growth goes, table 1 there, I think you can see that fairly well, describes what it has been over the years. When a community is smaller, we often see larger annual percent growth rates, which is also the case here in Washington. One of the interesting numbers, we all remember the 2000 to 2010 years where we had those higher growth rates till 2008. Then we had the recession set in, and you can see how that reduced from that 8.65 down to 4%, 4.4%. in that period between 2010, 2017. And then the city's kind of picked up, but the city got big enough at that time that we're starting to see a more normal, steady growth rate in the tune of 3%. And it's, I think, a little bit higher than that right now. But in general, that 3% number seems to be pretty good. And so as part of one note there on the 2011 to 2020 planning period, we've seen an average between 3 and 5% is what those growth rates have come out as. With the city, we selected a 3% annual growth rate as our planning basis. And I would just highlight that selection of a growth rate for an impact fee facilities plan is a subjective process. We look at the background data, try and get a feel for what current building permit rates look like, and then make a selection. And then the plan is kind of based on the outcome of that plan, and the way that it's written and the way the numbers fall out is based on that growth rate. But it's important to remember that the actual growth rate, and I wrote may vary, I should have written will vary in there, because you never nail it just right on. But
I thought you was talking about Andy Griffin's home.
The,
Mayberry, right?
That's right, Mayberry. But the one thing to remember is that the outcome of the plan isn't really hinged on that growth rate. If, for example, we planned a 3 but we got a 5, what happens is the demand for services comes in more quickly, but so do the impact fees to support the expenditures required by those demands. And then by the same token, if the growth rate was planned at 3 and comes in at 1.5 or 2, the demand for the services is delayed, and so is the impact fee revenue. So we try and get it as close as we can for the purposes of how the written report comes out, but it does vary. Interestingly, your build-out population projection is 185,000 people based on zoning. Our planning horizon is 10 years, so we're not looking towards build-out, but it is kind of nice to have a feel for what that build-out number would look like, and every so often consider that in a planning population. One other thing to note is population capacity. So if we look over at that lower table there, looking at the characteristics, your population in 2020 is in the neighborhood of 29,000 people, and at the end of 10 years, it grows by about 10,000 people. The population capacity is driven on census numbers on housing units. So for example, in the 2010 census, there were counted 7,546 total housing units in the city. Of those 7,500, about 6,100 were occupied. The other gap between there, that other 23%, are second homes, or their rental homes, or their vacation homes, things like that don't always have somebody in them. But we have to think, when we calculate impact fees and we calculate services, we have to be thinking about the condition, what's the population capacity if those were filled up. And so that's the number that we use as the basis for the plan. And so the population capacity is higher. It's 35,000, 36,000 today, or in 2020, and then by 2030 it'll jump up to 48,000. Non-residential units in the each, so those would be commercial, industrial, institutional, and other connections. We expect to go from 615 units to 826 units, or if you convert that to equivalent residential unit, a term I think everybody's familiar with for the most part, is that right? then it's 3,000 to 4,000. So you get about 1,000 non-residential ERU jump in the planning horizon. And then the residential units, it's going to be about a $4,000 or 4,000 ERU jump in the planning horizon. So you're about $5,000 change, or $5,000, a 5,000 unit ERU change over the planning horizon. Any questions on those growth numbers as a basis?
But a good basis that the citizens that might be listening could use is that the non-residential jumps about 300 for like a 2,500 square foot home, something like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Again, basis for the plan, and the reason these growth numbers are important is because it helps inform us how much additional service we're going to need to build into the utility, in this case, the public safety utility. Next slide. Okay, back two. There we go. And so after we look at those growth projections, we get into the impact fee facilities plan. That's the proper term that's designated in the Utah Impact Fees Act. And so that's the language that we'll try and use. So what you have now on the fire side, 3 stations. There's Station 61 at 8,200 square feet, Station 62 at 4,800 square feet, Station 64, which is 9,500 square feet, but it shares 360 square feet with the police department. And then what's remaining of that is divided in half with Hurricane City. And so that's how we get our total square footage for fire stations. Then we have in those stations, we have equipment, including the fire apparatuses, and we have existing debt service to the total tune of $1.5 million remaining on those fire facilities. Again, just in high-level summary. The discussion with the fire department and Chief Evans, there's planned a new fire station. It will be needed on the horizon within the planning period. That number, we've slated at 9,500 square feet. There is some excess capacity built into that fire station, so that we serve an existing need, and then there'll be some capacity built into it for growth, so we can grow into it. The location has been discussed down in the Fields area. I don't know that there's a specific location selected, but that's the location of need. There's also built into the needs a new apparatus and a new ladder truck. So those are your 3 demands that we're short on your fire side. On the police department side, we have the existing station at just under 16,000 square feet. And then we have excuse me, evidence containers that we've included for 320 square feet. And then at the portion of existing Station 4 that we referenced is the 360 square feet. And the fire apparatuses I should have taken out of there. I didn't notice that. But then the debt service is just under $4 million going forward. So that it gets included into the impact fee calculation. And so that brings us to the level of service. Now, in the Impact Fees Act, the level of service is the legal term that's defined in there. And essentially what that means is the offering that a community provides to its citizens on a given utility. And so what are we providing to the community in fire suppression and emergency services? What are we providing in police services? There's always a qualitative and a quantitative component to it. For example, on the fire side, we measure it in square feet of fire station, but there's really a quality of that square feet as well that it gets included in the numerical, the dollar calculation. So quality includes how well equipped are we, or can we go fight the fires? How much manpower do we have? So there's those 2 things. Even though we measure it on a qualitative basis on square foot of floor space, there's the quality side that's also built into that number when we think about pulling those costs together. Just by way of example, parks, we measure in square feet of park per 1,000 people, or excuse me, acreage per 1,000 people, or miles of trail per 1,000 people is the number that we use there to identify the quantities. Water, we compare it against what's required by the Utah Administrative Code, the R309 rules, and so how much pressure are we delivering, how much fire flow are we delivering? That's the basis. And so public safety, we look at as a unit, the square foot of coverage on the buildings, and then the apparatus and the debt that goes with it, but it measured on a square foot per ERU. Impact fees, it's important to know that impact fees can't fund a change in level of service. So if your level of service is at 1.2, for example, for fire, an induced impact fee can't buy things that would bring that level of service up. It can only continue the level of service or allow it to reduce. And then the target levels of service are established by the community. So when we do a parks impact fee plan, for example, we ask the leisure services director, do you feel like we're offering a satisfactory offering to your community? And the answer is yes or no. We need to come up, we need to go down, we have too much, too little, et cetera. So in that same vein, at the public facilities side or public safety side, how much do we really need to offer? And the answer for this plan in the discussions with the chiefs has been that the fire department target level of service ought to be 0.91 square feet per ERU. And then the police department is 0.7 square feet per ERU. So today in 2020, based on that chart there, we're at 1.2 square feet per ERU. In 2030, if we implement the improvements that are discussed and those growth rates come into play, we'll be at 1.36 square feet per ERU. And then police the same, 1.11 to 0.83, so that one's reducing. The reason that the police is reducing is because we're not putting any new investment in terms of offering in square footage. So but meanwhile, the population is going up and there's a loss in value and depreciation. So we're having that square foot per ERU come down to what the level of service is as a target. That makes sense? Okay, next slide. We'll look at this next one here. And so here's the impact fee analysis. We take all that information that we've discussed and boil that into the analysis, and it's best captured in these tables. But the current public safety impact fee was a result of the 2014 study, and it was established by the city council at that time at $385 per residential connection and at 24 cents per square foot of non-residential building area. So that's your current impact fee that's enacted now for reference. And then what we do is we take a look at all of the impact fee eligible costs and then calculate what we recommend as an updated impact fee. So if you look at table 3, the impact fee eligible costs, you can see that there's divided in that leftmost column where it talks about project, there's the non-residential only, and there's the residential and non-residential. So the public safety impact fees in the Impact Fee Act, we can't contemplate payment for vehicular improvements, so fire apparatus, ladder trucks, et cetera. We can't contemplate the coverage of those in the residential fee, so they've got to be accounted for in your non-residential impact fees. The brick and mortar improvements, excuse me, the brick and mortar improvements can be covered under both of them. So in that next column over in the year, we're in discussions prior, we're anticipating these other improvements coming in those years. So a new fire apparatus in 2022, a ladder truck in 2020. I'm not sure if that got done or not. It did? In 21. Okay. And then the new Fields Fire Station in 2022. And then impact fee plan updates are eligible for coverage under the Impact Fees Act as well. And so we typically put those in so you can fund them out of impact fees in the future. Again, so we have a 10-year planning horizon. So there's 2 plans, one in 2025, one in 2030, and those are rolled into the calculation. The project costs that are shown there in that third column are in today's, well, they were in 2020 dollars when we updated the plan. And then in that fourth column over, that's where we start to give the haircuts based on level of service and impact fee eligibility. So remember, we can't have impact fees fund increases in level of service. So part of the spreadsheet that is shown in summary here includes calculations on what portions of those fire and police stations are being used to cover existing housing and population, and what portion are excess capacity above and beyond your target level of service that can support and absorb new growth. And so that's where so we start putting the haircuts on what the project costs are right there, and back those down to what's impact fee eligible. And then in the next column over in the fifth column, then we begin to imply the financing costs. And so those financing costs are eligible under the Impact Fees Act. And so then we roll those back on and up and calculate on that rightmost column a 10-year impact fee eligible cost. So what portion of the impact fee eligible portion of the individual improvements will be seen and anticipated in that 10-year window. And so then we back that on down and get a summary there. Question?
Yeah, so the question I have is, why can't we use the ladder truck as a residential? I mean, it services.
It is, but it got written into the Impact Fees Act, and I'm not sure what the
So it's just
history
the Impact Fee Act.
just
Okay.
is what it is. Doesn't make sense to me either, but do you know anything more about that, Thad? But
So
about that
so
history?
with that, so we just based off the non-residentials, the 0.359 per square foot, and that just hits the commercial stuff, basically.
It does, it covers, so if we go down to that next table,
Can you talk into the mic a little bit? They're saying they can't hear you on the.
oh, I'm sorry. I'm getting excited about my presentation and going on. In the residential, excuse me. I've got a lingering tickle from a prior illness as well, but the residential growth in ERUs is 4,000. The non-residential growth is 1,000. And so what we've done is taken those impact fee eligible costs without the fire truck and apparatus, and then with the fire truck and apparatus. And you can see how if you total those two, the 2,110,000 and the 319,000 together, those equal the $2.4 million that came from the table above. And so we divide those eligible costs in those typical units and assign them to the non-residential and residential ERU.
Yeah, I saw how you did that. Yeah, I was just curious why we couldn't use it when it's used for residential, and it makes sense to me that you should be able to use it. But if it's the law, it's the law. So
there is quite a bit of lobbying that takes place on those Impact Fee Act negotiations, and I would guess that was how that came out. But
yeah, impact fees are an entire creature from the Utah legislature. They're authorized by statute. They're regulated by statute. Statute tells us what we can charge, requires that we do the capital facility studies that Joe's discussed. Anyway, we're grateful that we're able to charge them so that we can recoup, the expenses of development that just the city's required to provide. But yeah, the legislature is the animal that created the entire mechanism that we have to engage.
So I know we're running short on time, but I have a question. So does that mean that of the $2.4 million for the new fire station, only 148,000 of that is impact fee eligible?
Within the horizon, the planning window. Yep. And we could look, Jeremy, we've got the spreadsheets and can drill down on those later if you'd like to see how those calculations played out. It's a little bit in depth for this kind of a setting, but the bottom line is we're recommending to you as a city council that the residential impact fee be increased to $416 per ERU, and the non-residential impact fee be increased to $0.359 dollars per square foot, so 36 cents per square foot from the 24 that was before. Next slide. This is my last one. Just a couple of things to remember. So it was mentioned in the prior presentation, the impact fee levels represent the maximum amounts the city council can implement the full amount or some lesser number, but not above the recommended calculation, the way that fell out. Improvement costs. So the improvement costs that we put in this plan are a little bit aged, and so they are based on pre-COVID supply chain and current inflation prices. And so I think if we were to go back through and update this plan again now, a number of months, 9 months later, I think from when we did it last time, we would probably see an increased recommended impact fee number. just because of those construction costs have changed. The Impact Fees Act requires that the impact fees collected be encumbered or spent within 6 years. And so you're in that business already. You know how to do it as a city. Just a note to remember that has to occur. And then it's also important to remember that the 10-year planning horizon and the 6-year encumbrance requirement are not connected. You can have a different planning horizon that is in the city's better interest, at the same time have the 6-year encumbrance window. The 6-year encumbrance window just comes from the Impact Fees Act, whereas the planning horizon is something that's selected based on what feels best and most logical for the community as you get into the planning process. And does that make sense? Sometimes we get those, we think those have to be tied together, but they don't. Okay. And then just that impact fees can only be expended for system improvements that were included in the impact fee facilities plan. So we have to be careful and try and capture anything we want in those plans. And then they've got to be expended on the public utility for which they were collected. You can't spend public safety money on water improvements, for example. So those are some things to remember about the impact fees. What questions can I answer for you?
Well, for the C Squad, you did pretty good.
For the what?
The C Squad. No, that was a good presentation.
Thank you. Hope these are they're really deep, but if you can keep them high level and show the highlights, they tend to turn out a little better, I think.
Any additional questions? Thank you very much.
Thanks,
Appreciate
Mayor.
it.
Thank you.
Okay, move on to discussion review of the advanced metering infrastructure. Lester or Mike, whoever's.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. I tried really hard to get Mike to present this for me, but he told me no. Hopefully you guys have had a chance to look through the information that I presented in the briefing document within your staff report. I tried to keep it short and sweet as to what the proposal is currently. This is an advanced metering request basically for the city as a whole. Currently we have about 2/3 of our meters that are in place that will accommodate this infrastructure. We would still need to change out about 1/3 of the meter registers that are in the city. What this would create for us is the ability to read the meters on cue, and they would be read every day with 1-hour interval data being collected. That data is immediately available to the customer as well as the utility. So by accomplishing this, it puts information available to the customer of literally the day before's water consumption that they had at their residence. We would put this in on all residential units with an intent to gradually bring the commercial online as well. Currently, we do not have this budgeted for in this year's budget. We do have the money available within the reserves. Kind of the intent that I had as we began looking at next year's budget was to include this into next year's budget. We've been working heavily with Master Meter and Schultz's Products being their distributor. That's who we've been with Master Meter since before I started here, so we're 20 years plus that we've been with the Master Meter system. They presented us with a propagation study, and they have proposed to us some pretty significant discounts if we can get this to occur. The discounts that they have proposed, and that's in your briefing document, they basically propose to more or less gift us the equipment by way of the base station and repeater units. And the only costs that we would have associated with them would be the installation of their installation of the base station repeater units. We would have a little bit of additional cost because part of that would be for us to provide the poles and help with the setting of the antennas. And then they also proposed to us, we need approximately 4,000 registers to get us up to speed for this AMI system. They propose some deep discounts associated with register replacements we would need to do. The overall cost that we can anticipate as a city is about $640,000. And the discounts that they're proposing to us are about $300,000. Included in this is going to be kind of a yearly, I wouldn't necessarily call it a subscription, but it's a yearly maintenance package that goes along with them hosting all the data so that we're not basically overwhelmed with the data collection. They would take care of that portion of it, as well as hosting the website for the users and the consumers to be able to look at and review that data. We would be receiving data on a daily basis. Makes billing much easier. We don't have the monthly drive around that we have to do. It's going to help with personnel costs. You know, right now we're barely able to cover it with a single meter reader.
Do we have that breakdown of the savings from not having to send the crews around? And
I haven't provided that breakdown. Currently, we have a single meter reader. So we have basically a single meter reader, so their wages, their benefits associated with that. That also includes, we have to have a truck for them. And we also have the radio equipment. The radio equipment associated with that vehicle is about $25,000.
And you indicated that there would need to be another meter reader if this isn't
Exactly.
implemented.
If we can't get this in place, I mean, it's just gotten to the point that we're so big. Currently, we're about 12,000 accounts. And with billing cycles, everything else, it takes her 5 days to make the reads right now. And that's just to drive the city, get all the reads, go back through, get whatever was missed, all of them components.
So those are basically drive-by scan reading now, right? Is the way it's done?
Yes, everything's a drive-by. We're with, our current system is what's referred to as an AMR system. It's advanced meter reading, so it's a drive-by radio read. For about, I want to say it's been about 8 years right now. The change outs that we've been doing as the batteries are going dead in them, we go out, do a change out, take the physical read, whatever it was. But in the meantime, we're not able to radio read that particular meter while it's dead. So we go out, we do the change out. The batteries are irreplaceable. They're a sealed component. Unlike power meters, our water meters are in probably about the harshest environment that you could request an electronic device to be. So when they're sealed up tight, when the battery goes dead, you have to replace the unit as a whole.
Are you talking about the newer, the ones for the AMI, or are you talking about the ones
The
that,
AMRs that we had
AMR.
previously, them have been in place for 20 years or better.
Right.
Once the battery goes dead, you've got to change out the whole device.
So are these for this AMR system, AMI system, they're more reliable or less of an issue that way, or?
The timing component's about the same. There's about a 10-year battery life associated with them. They've got a prorated warranty for that 10 years. So they give us a prorated discount if the battery dies before that.
They're as easy to change out as the old.
Yes.
The older ones.
They're actually really easy to change out from a physical visit to the site. It takes about 20 minutes to fully go through everything, get all the paperwork, get everything done. Takes about 20 minutes to do a meter.
so Lester, I see that there's 11 65-foot poles, the antennas. Where do you have those locations identified?
There's a map there somewhere.
There's
Well, I
a
saw
map
the
there,
map, but
but
it
the
was not
print
very
did not come through.
It's not very
well.
clear. It's tough.
No, it's horrible.
Yeah, look at that beautiful map. Can't tell where you're at.
Let me see if I can pull it
Until
up
there's
here for you.
I-15 across there.
So we can have him send that out to you too in a better format.
There's not really a better format.
He's got a GIS guy. He can get it in a better format, I promise you.
So the question I have is, are these locations, like, is it city property, or we have to go get the
Yes, they are all
easements?
city property. All the locations that we've put in are city property. I've obviously went to the wrong one because it wants me to put in a code.
So I think, it's going to cost us some money. There's no doubt about it. We'll have some cost savings on the back end. This is where everything's headed. It's a huge water conservation issue, and I think we'd be way ahead of the game from a water conservation standpoint. I mean, Rick can explain at some point we'll have to go this route with power as well. But the reason to do it now, number one, we have the money available in the water fund. We didn't budget for it, but as long as we're getting those deep discounts at this point, I think that's why it is attractive now as opposed to waiting for the budget. But
So I want to ask the obvious question on this, at least in my mind. This is all going to be paid by user fees, right? There's no portion of this that is impact fee eligible, speaking of impact fees,
No,
where,
this is-
where it's really being required because of the growth. You know, if we were 15 years ago, we wouldn't, and even if, when we have the technology today, we wouldn't be talking about it. It's because of growth.
But we're not raising rates. We have this money set aside.
No, I understand that. I'm just, but I'm always just looking at where's the cost, you know, how is it going to be covered? Should it be users or should it?
I would say if we didn't grow another household, we'd still want to do this.
Yeah.
You know, just for the water conservation issue.
As long as, and I figured you probably have looked at that, has been looked at it. None of it is impact fee.
It's going to be paid for by prior user fees that we've collected.
So
Yeah.
It's also made available by growth in technology. You know, modern technology gives us the opportunity to have a lot more data.
Yeah. So in line with that, then a question that came to my mind is, okay, so we have 11 poles around the area and we have all this sophisticated, like, you know, if the bank computers go down, I can't even go down and get $1 from the bank. What happens with this system if somebody runs over a pole or you know, the electronics have an issue? What's the fix there?
The drive-by scenario is still a fallback option. The drive-by scenario is still there, and we always have the actual physically go out.
So even with the new
paper.
meters for this AMI, the other could be
Yes.
utilized. Okay.
Yes.
So is there a reason why this is coming up like now prior to you want to put it in next year's budget, but get
Well, kind of what this breaks down to is we've got some significant discounts that are being offered right now through Master Meter, as well as looking at the components, all of the different moving components, the potential for new hires, everything that's coming up in the next budget year. The timing component associated with this, we're out probably 4 months just for FCC licensing. We've also got about 4 months just to get the polls. We've got another probably 3 months to do the register changeouts. Our intent is to do that with existing employees. Just have the water department go out and do them changeouts.
So the reason why I asked the question, I guess, is that they're giving us a significant discount, which is good, but are they just giving us stuff that's going to be out of date? Like they're just
No,
trying to
that's-
clearance out what they have so they can get their new stuff, or is that why they're giving us a discount?
Part of the yearly fees associated with this, with all the data hosting, everything else, is if we have one of these repeaters that goes down, if it has a malfunction electronically, basically anything short of a lightning strike that goes wrong with it, that's part of the insurance policy we're buying with that yearly. They come out, they change it out, and we move on to the next generation, whatever it may be. If they have upgrades that come along, that's part of that as well. So if they're upgrading their equipment, ours becomes obsolete for whatever changes they've made, they pay for that upgrade.
So what was that yearly fee? Did you tell us?
It's in your packet.
So this
With
is
our
the
current
insurance
meter
fee.
counts right now, it's 28,500 a year.
That's the insurance
There it is.
for them,
Right.
for the,
Yeah, that's the maintenance. That's the maintenance associated with all of the repeaters and all of the towers.
So what if we need additional repeaters based on the growth of the city? That's just, we'll have to look at those costs later. and
Right, we'll be
purchase
looking
those.
at them costs as they come up. Right now, this is the propagation study. I do have it in a Google Earth format, a KMZ file that I can send out to you guys to have you, if you're capable of opening it and want to, that kind of shows the anticipation of coverage areas. So the red areas are exceptional coverage. And as the map gets cooler and goes down to the blues are spotty coverage. So as you can see, we've got the bulk of the city that's encompassed with either reds or yellows. We do have a couple of light spots up in the Green Springs areas. They have another repeater option that's available to us for a huge decrease in cost. And this repeater is one that we replace a photocell in one of the streetlights with it. And they work really well for doing small localized areas that you're having problems with. but it's only after you have the problem, and them repeaters are about $650 a piece.
Would you have to do a bunch of them?
Oh yeah, we can do a whole bunch of
No,
them.
no, I'm asking, like, say you had a problem like you're showing, would you have to go, because $650 doesn't seem,
No,
outrageous.
looking at this, potentially there might be 3 of them that could possibly occur in
Have to
that
add 'em.
area. Or this particular area, it might be better served with one large repeater that we could put on the golf course. You know, just find a spot that's out of the way and put it there on the golf course on some city-owned property. The bigger issue that we have with the big repeaters and the big base units is I have to have a power supply for them.
So these are strictly radio sick transmission, right?
Correct.
So Lester, you've covered this a couple of different ways, but so you do have the reserves. You've already saved the money for this, for most of the cost, and there is a subscription cost. Have we checked with, and maybe the mayor knows this as well, where he's on the Washington County Water Conservancy District Board, but is there any monies or funds available where this is a conservation effort that we could maybe check into?
There was a potential grant that was out there that was available for possible AMI meter reading. And the last report I heard from that is they had $50 million available and they were like 1.5 billion in requests.
Yeah, that's usually how it
And
goes.
it was horrendous numbers associated with it.
We could have the mayor check with Zach though and see if there's a special Washington
Maybe we
City
can, yeah,
Check, Mayor.
sure.
grant available.
So,
Yeah, part of this request is kind of the repeater locations. We've tried to scale these towers and antennas back as best we can. What they're looking at is needing to be 50 feet above the ground surface.
just
What?
65 is,
65-foot poles. Some of them poles are buried.
okay.
So I've got to have the anchor for the pole. With a 65-foot pole, we actually get to about 56 feet above grade. So part of what the request is here is just acknowledgement that you guys understand where we're proposing these repeaters, just so that, you know, if somebody complains that we're standing up a power pole, that everybody knows that it's not a power pole, it's a pole for an antenna. Okay. The antennas aren't exceptionally large. They're about 4 feet long.
Will you have a more detailed, hey, this is it, this is what it's next to, analysis for us?
This is about as far as what we've got with it right now.
I'm just saying in the future, if this goes forward, I would like to see to make sure that we're just aware that because you might say, yeah, I can see that map and see the dots on the city, but I don't know where that's at on this. Like,
I could create a map that gave you, you know, at least a little bit of detail. These are city-owned properties, for example, the ones in the Treasure Valley Park down there, kind of by the bathrooms. I'm going to try and keep them close to a power source. The other one is that's out here is a little tiny piece of property that we've got that's got a booster pump on it for the water system.
and then
Out in Stookie Farms.
my other question is and reading through the report, you mentioned that you have daily input. Are we going to set up a system that we can, like, if the residents want to have them get a text message or something like that that says, hey, your water usage is out of control? Because I think we've all been there where we had a broken line. It just ran and ran and ran. I have, at least.
I have a little bit of inside information. Hurricane City has already implemented their tower system, and I happen to have one of these meters that I'm talking about on my home. I live in Hurricane. So this is the app that's available to the customer. They can come in here, they can set their own alerts for leaks. They can set their a suspected leak alert. They can set it up for an email send out or an SMS send out. They can set up consumption cycle limits. So if they're shooting for a target, for example, the district was talking about a surcharge, anything over 36 gallons or 36,000 gallons. I have me an alert set up when I'm approaching that. They can also set up for if they want a notification if they're on vacation and there's usage of their house.
It sounds like it's usable that way. But does the city have plans to help notify the residents as well?
Yes, kind of what our intent is with it, because the utility receives that alert as well. So we can set horizons as to when we want to receive that alert, the alert. On the customer end, the customer has the ability to say, I would like to receive a leak alert. And what that means is if they've had continuous usage for a 24-hour period, they're going to get an alert. So, for example, this actually worked in my benefit on my own home. I received 2 leak alerts. And I thought, this is not real. It's just a glitch in the system. I went out and I pulled the lid on the meter, and I'm looking at it. And I know I have 0 water consumption in my home at that time, and it's showing a 0.2 gallon a minute draw. So 2 months later, when I finally got tired of receiving these alerts, I started doing some own investigation on my own personal level, and I had a leak under my home. I was dumping 300 gallons a day under my home, and it went on for about 2 months. But the customer has the ability, for example, my home, that's my consumption on an hourly basis at my home yesterday. And this updates at midnight every night for the consumer on the other end of that. So it gives you how much your water you're using per hour.
Any additional questions? Thank you, Lester. Appreciate it. We'll move on to our last item.
Thank you, Mayor, Council.
I can go really fast, really quickly.
You'll need to go really fast.
I will. And on the line, we have Will Barnes and Bill Lincecum from BGP Partners, Barnes Gibson Partners. Now, if you remember, just really quickly, we discussed commercial design guidelines for the Washington Fields area, specifically 3650 South and Washington Fields Road. So I've been working with BGP for quite a few months, and in your packet is the proposal to do this project, to get started on it. So that's really the question. Did you have any questions for them on how to get started? I did send out an email with some examples of work that they've done. They also have helped the city in the past with working on the design guidelines for the downtown mixed use overlay zone that we did quite a few years ago. So they have good track record with the city. What we'd be proposing, and I guess the reason I'm looking for some direction tonight, is that they would come beginning the second week in November and meet with the city council and with interested stakeholders to get the ball rolling on the project. So you can see they have 2 steps. The total will be about $25,600 for those first 2 steps. But at the end, we would have some design guidelines that we could give to somebody who is preparing to put in a PUD, a commercial PUD application with the city to say, this is what we're looking for, this is what we'd like to see. So they're on the line. If you have any specific questions, we can have a little bit more discussion later if there's anything for me. And there they are. Look at them. Did you want to add anything really quick, Will or Bill?
Jeremy, I think you covered it. Can you hear me?
Yes.
This is Will Barnes, and I'm glad to be here with y'all tonight, and certainly glad to show you some examples of the work or to answer any questions that you might have.
I'd love to spend an hour watching the work, but unfortunately we don't have that time tonight. So any specific questions, I would add they're on East Coast, so they won't be available later in the meeting when the item comes up.
I mean, we've talked about this in the past. We want to move forward with it. It's a general consensus, right? So
Yes. Okay.
we should have them back and have that discussion.
Well, they'll be here then the second week in November to get the ball rolling if that's where we like to go. I think it's something we've wanted for quite a while, and they share a good vision for what we're looking to do there. But meeting with the stakeholders in the council will help refine that. So, okay, well, thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, gentlemen. Have a great
Okay.
rest of the evening.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Okay, we'll move on to, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Bundy, second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, let's take a 5-minute break, just to let you folks know that we're short 2 councilmen and we may be short a 3rd one soon, so we'll go until we can't go anymore. So it might be a whole night or it might be 5 minutes, so just FYI. Mhm. Well, he's not, he might have to leave. meeting. I've asked Councilman Bundy if he will lead us in our invocation, and Councilman Ivy if he will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Our Father in heaven, we humbly bow before thee this evening and recognize the great value and importance of it is for us to live in this free land of America, and for the freedoms that we enjoy, and that our Constitution provides for us, and that to be here and to make decisions for our own community. We pray that thy Spirit would attend us as we consider the things that are before us, that we will have the inspiration necessary to make decisions that are best and most agreeable to all citizens. We thank thee for this land we live in, and for the beauties that surround us, and for those who have gone before us and the great sacrifice they've made for us to enjoy our circumstances today. Again, we are thankful for all that we have, and we ask for a continued blessing with us to make those decisions that are appropriate. And we say this in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Would you please stand and repeat after me? Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate that. Just FYI again, we have two councilmen that are excused tonight and one councilman that might need to be in a last second deal. So if that happens, we won't have a quorum. So at that point, we'll just table everything. So you may be here for something and when it may get tabled, we apologize, but state law requires that we have a quorum. So this meeting is also on washingtoncity.org/meetings, and we welcome any of those out there to our meeting tonight. Move on to item 1, approval of our agenda.
Bundy, I motion to approve the agenda that we have before us.
Second by Coates.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any announcements? There is one that I'd like to bring up. Our Arts Council has 20 of our local artists here in Washington are displaying their art wares over at the new art museum. Is it museum?
It's the old courthouse in St. George, but I'm not sure what.
St. George Art Museum.
St. George Art Museum. This Friday from 6 to 8, we welcome any of you that would like to come and see what our local artists are doing. It's right across the street from the St. George City Office Building.
So it's called the Red Cliffs Gallery.
Red Cliffs Gallery.
At 220 North, 200 East in St. George.
Thank you.
I think for some, it may have even been a jail back in the day. So maybe, depending on who we're talking to, right?
Yeah. I'll take the Fifth Amendment on that one. That made me lose my train of thought.
Declarations.
I had some friends that were in there with me.
I'm old enough that I actually practiced law in there. So it was a courthouse when I first started working.
Okay, we'll move on to item 3, declaration of abstentions and conflicts. Any to declare at this time? Okay, if not, we'll move on to our consent agenda. To approve the board audit report for September, approval of minutes from the city council meetings of 9/21, 9/22/21, and 9/23/21. Final plats, 2 of those. To approve a final plat for Desert Ridge Phase 1A and 1B located approximately Bella Vista Drive, Desert Cactus Lane. Applicant Sunwood Homes of Southern Utah, Inc. And to approve a final plat for Brio Phase 6A located approximately Via del Sol and Washington Parkway. Applicant Coal West Homes.
Mayor, if there's no comments, I'll make a motion. We approve the consent agenda as outlined.
Bundy, second.
I have a motion and a second.
Bundy, aye.
Coates, aye.
Ivy, aye.
Thank you. That's approved. Item 5, appointment. Consideration to appoint election workers for the Washington City General Election. Tara, are you online?
I am. Good evening, Mayor and Council. This is simply a housekeeping item. I noticed back on our meeting on July 14th, when we noticed the meeting, we we're appointing our poll workers for the primary election rather than the entire municipal election. So we are using the exact same poll workers for our general election that we used in the primary election. Just according to state law, I need a vote that you are in agreement to appoint them.
Mayor, I'll make that motion that we appoint the poll workers as outlined in our packet.
Bundy, second.
Roll call vote.
Bundy, aye.
Goat's eye.
Ivy, aye.
Thank you. That is approved, Tara. Item 6, proclamation for Domestic Violence Awareness Month. Are you ladies here for that? Okay, I'd like to read that if I may. Whereas it is a basic human right to have a life free from violence and abuse, and whereas domestic violence is a serious problem that occurs in all cultures and communities, does not discriminate by age, gender, social class, race, ethnicity, religious affiliation, or sexual orientation, and whereas 1 in 3 women and 1 in 7 men in Utah will experience intimate partner violence in their lifetime, and that 60 to 75% of families with intimate partner violence have children who are also impacted by the violence. And whereas seniors are also victims of domestic violence, domestic and sexual violence, and are a part of the most underreported group. And whereas domestic violence related homicides account for over 40% of homicides in Utah, and 80 Utah children will witness the murder or attempted murder of their mother every year. And whereas awareness and intentional collaboration are required to find solutions to abuse and intimate partner violence. And whereas it is the role of local government to provide for the health, safety, and welfare of its citizens. Now, therefore, I, Kenneth Nielsen, Mayor of Washington City, Utah, in partnership with the Dove Center and the Washington County Coordinated Community Response Team, to hereby proclaim October as Domestic Violence Awareness Month in the city of Washington. We urge all residents to use October as Domestic Violence Awareness Month to learn how they can break the silence and end domestic violence in our community. In witness thereof, I hereunto set my hand and cause to be affixed the seal of Washington City, Utah, this 13th day of October, 2021. Anything to add, ladies?
We just want to thank you for.
Come on up. State your name.
My name is Brenda Evans. Brenda Evans.
Thanks, Brenda.
And I have Elizabeth Bloom here with me from Dove Center, and we're also members of the Washington County Coordinated Community Response Team. And we would like to thank you, Mayor Nelson, and Washington City Council members for recognizing October as a Domestic Violence Awareness Month for your city. We really appreciate your engagement and recognition of this issue that we work with every day. So we would like to just emphasize that without intervention, abuse escalates, and for many it becomes life-threatening. So we can't minimize this subject, as difficult as it is. And we work with the survivors every day, and we continue to see increases in the need for our services. And so we appreciate your recognition and support of the work that we do in our community. Thank you.
Thank you for the work that you do. We appreciate it.
Mayor, may I make just a comment about that?
Let's give him a hand.
I had the pleasure this last week to go over and meet with staff there at Aaron's house. And this is a great thing that you're doing. There's recognition, but it also requires a little bit of work. And at the Aaron's home here in Washington, they have need for some improvements and some work. So we have an agenda item on the 27th of this month that will address some of those needs. And we want you to know that, me personally, that being there and learning more about what that provides for definitely for people that are in need, it's something that I can completely get behind. And we look forward to discussing not only that, but ongoing support is my hope for what the city would do for the Dove Center and Aaron's house.
Thank you. We appreciate that recognition.
Would you like representatives from Dove Center to be here on the 27th?
I think
If
that
you'd
that
like.
is already arranged, but yes, please come back 2 weeks from tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, moving on. Item 7, water metering. Consideration to move forward with installation of advanced metering infrastructure. Assistant Public Works Director, Lester Dalton.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. As I'm sure you're very well aware, in our current state, drought conditions and need for conservation.
A little louder. There you go.
As
Thank you.
staff, we're recommending to move ahead with a AMI metering system for all of the water meters within Washington City. We're in kind of a dire drought condition. I'm sure everybody's aware of that. And we want to make sure that we're doing everything we can as staff on proposals for conservation for water within the city. This proposal is not in the current budget. It will require a budget opening if we move ahead with it. So as staff, we're recommending that we do. There's been some pretty significant cost savings proposed to us from Master Meter for this implementation of this system.
So is this dollar amount the top that we need? 639,925?
Yes, that is correct.
So if you approve this, then Public Works would go ahead with the purchase, but we would put this in our next budget opening that Brian would bring to you. So,
And so just reaffirming that we have this in our funds to pay for this. We're not.
Yes, we
no
do have
increase
this
in
available
fees.
in the unrestricted funds.
As well as the ongoing costs.
Yes.
How many of these initially are you going to do?
Initially, we're looking at 2 tower locations and 9 repeater locations.
Great.
And if approved, as discussed in the workshop session, we'll bring you a little more clear map so that council's able to review and know what those locations will be.
And also with that, I'd like to have some of the cost savings that's going to help the city at that time as well. Just maybe a follow-up, just some
I can put together
bullet line items of some savings that we're going to have.
Okay.
And a possible update with Mayor, what you're going to take back to the Conservancy District to see if there's possible fundings or grants available to us in this project.
And maybe just as a matter for public awareness, AMI meters are advanced technology meters that allow for real-time reading of your utility meters. Would also allow for you to have electronic access to your utility usage on a daily basis.
Yes, via the web or smartphone related apps.
If there's no more discussion, Mayor, I would make a motion to move forward with the installation of advanced metering infrastructure.
Bundy, second.
I have a motion and a second. We'll do a roll call vote.
Bundy, aye.
Coates, aye.
Ivy, aye.
All right. Thanks, Lester. That's
Thank you, Mayor,
approved.
Council.
Item 8, preliminary plat, continuation of consideration to approve a preliminary plat for North Rim Farms located approximately 300 East, 4800 South. Applicant AWE LLC.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. This item was tabled on September 22nd, 2021, to give the applicant time to update the hillside cross-section detailing the berm and rockfall catch guard that is located at the bottom of the hillside. Detail A and Detail B on the revised plan show these changes. The applicant has also identified access to service the rockfall catch basin, which can be found in two locations such as Lot 9, Detail B, and Lot 29, Detail B. The applicant has also moved the rockfall berm into the lots where possible to minimize the cut height on the hillside. The maximum cut height will be 46 foot tall behind a couple of the lots and 28 feet tall behind Lot 29. The majority of the cuts will range from 20 to 25 feet. And we're happy to answer any questions you may have at this time.
The question I have first, I guess, it's for Mike. Did he leave? Oh. Will you grab him for me, Jeremy? I can ask. Sorry, Mike, I got a question for you. So on this preliminary plat, are you comfortable with that 1-to-1 slope on that existing surface?
Yes, as long as the geotechnical engineer gives us a buy-off on it, that we're comfortable.
Okay.
So part of the conversation we had, and then we reached out and exchanged emails with the engineers on this. And what I had initially, one of the concerns that I had was whether a 1-to-1 or 1-to-2 slope would be better. I know that you're dealing with different cut heights, but you also have to consider when you have a rock catchment berm or basin, you know, for any possible rock slides. And I would say that this formation isn't known for rock slides. They happen, but it's not a, you know, it's not one of the worst ones. But my thoughts were in being able to control the cut slope, then you might affect a better result in the berm to contain any rock falls. Now, you know, it all depends on other issues we talked about in the emails. We talked about earthquakes. We talked about some other events that might precipitate an event. But for me, I want it more as a discussion. I don't want to be because I initiated these emails and back and forth. But my thoughts are that the big question in this project is whether or not we're good with a 1-to-1, considering cut slope, or 1-to-2, which could possibly serve the catchment basin better. So I guess that's just bringing the council and mayor up to speed on where I'm at. Everyone knows I have some expertise in this area, and it just is always something that catches my attention. I did read Mr. Rogers's report, and it was well done. It all made perfect sense. But I think as a council, we just need to discuss those couple of issues, which I would enjoy.
What would you like to discuss on it? I guess on the
Well,
aspects of, because 1-to-1, I'm never comfortable with 1-to-1 unless it's rock, and I didn't see where it was rock, like solid rock that would go. You could go vertical at that point.
You know, it's a conglomerate formation, and you know you can say that it has stability because it's conglomerate, but it also has multiple, you know, fracture points and things like that I won't get into. But that's why I want the discussion. I have never been comfortable with the 1-to-1 slope, to be honest. Now, you know, you go 1-to-2, you're going to have a higher cut height, but
well, I wouldn't. So I agree with you. So I agree with you on the fact that, I mean, standard is typically 2-to-1 on cuts and 3-to-1 on fills, and that's in our grading master plan that way too. If we go 2-to-1, you're going to chase that hill forever, or you got to push the slope out.
And that's the discussion I think that we're at. I like the project. I think there's been great due diligence done in this. It's just, for me, that's where it comes down to, is the 1-to-1 slope.
Could someone remind me, we talked about this being a hillside, right? And, but this has not gone to the Hillside Review Board, or, I know this is a preliminary plat amendment, but did we decide that that should be looked at by the Hillside Review Board? Because
I thought it was low enough down the hill we didn't have to on this one.
is it,
But
is it within the overlay zone, I guess is the first question?
Well, it's within the overlay zone, and it's at the toe of the hill. They're not like building upwards. So, you know, could you technically say go back and do it? But I think you're not going to get much change. I think the geotech on this sits on my hillside, or not my hillside, doesn't he? Doesn't, this one doesn't. So, but you could, but it's at the toe of it. It's not going to, say in almost some of these cuts, the houses are gonna.
But Drew, even just addressing this and previous agenda items where we've talked about just having that rock solid information, instead of having a thumbs up or thumbs down, because it always seems to come up that some of those
I will tell you, just to cover that, it wasn't really overlooked. I think at the time when the zoning took place, we asked this question, and I'm not blaming the engineers or anything, but they said, no, it'll be at the toe. We've kind of already looked into that. But then I think then they started doing all the technical work and the survey and everything, then I think it ended up or else we would have. If we would have known it was over here back then, we would have done that.
But I think initially, everybody thought it was at the toe, or if it was going to be, going anywhere, it's only going to be 3 to 5 feet into it. And I've been out there, if you get out there, that last 3 or 5 feet is, I would even say as staff, I wouldn't make them go through the hillside. But then I think as, again, surveying started taking place and putting everything together, it ended up going into the hill a little farther than it probably was anticipated.
I actually was there just yesterday morning. I walked it and looked around, and it's, again, that's just, I know that it's been a topic for council discussion, and I just come back to again, I don't want to be redundant, but it's just the cut slope. That's, I think I have confidence, we have great engineers on this that will do their due diligence, and I'm not worried about that. It's just, what does the council want to see as a cut slope? To me, that's what it comes back to.
So is, you having been there, is it already cut?
No.
There's nothing cut there now.
So on that, you asked the question, what does the council want to see? And I want to see the 2-to-1s and 3-to-1s for our grading master plan, unless there's rock there. If there's rock there, it makes sense that you can cut it more vertical. And I think I'm not clear that there's rock there. Going through that geotech report, it didn't address where the hard rock was or not, and so I just don't know. That's where my comfort level goes. But I also don't want a 2-to-1 scar all the way up the hill.
I know.
So
I know.
So did I understand?
Yeah, we can let the applicant.
Yeah.
It's okay if I just make a point of clarification. First of all, on the hillside thing, I apologize. Last time I was here, I said...
State your name,
Oh,
please.
sorry.
Yes,
Yeah, my name's Rick Meyer with Bush and Gudgel. Last time we were here, I said I thought it had gone through his hillside committee, and I went back to the office and I said, oh, it hasn't. So, but it was because, like Drew was saying, it was like right on the edge there. So anyway, I apologize about that confusion. With regards to the 1-to-1 slope, Wayne has said that there's bedrock out there. We don't know exactly the extent of the bedrock, and so there's going to be some bedrock and some that's not bedrock. He's confident that a 1-to-1 slope would be stable, but if it comes down to council saying we're not comfortable with a 1-to-1 slope, so you have to do a 2-to-1 or go back. So bottom line is the owner is authorized additional measures for stabilizing a 1-to-1 slope if that's what you feel comfortable with, like
would that be
cut
the
back
mesh?
and put some reinforcement in it, and so it's like a more stabilized type slope with rock facing or something like that, if that's what you feel more comfortable with. So, and you just put that in your conditions or something like that. So
can we put some walls in randomly to help?
We could put walls in.
I'm just I'm just looking at the contours as I go along here, and there's some spikes. I'm just wondering if it makes sense to add a few walls here and there just to help with the
with those kind of
just the knob
rims that come out, or ridges or whatever that come out.
How would we do those in relationship to the catchment basin? Where would the walls be? I mean,
I would assume, looking at the detail, that it would be on the. So can you pull up the cross section A, the hillside and rock toe on the preliminary plat?
It's a different document, Drew. Is it in here? It's not this document, but
yeah, it's the actual plat. It's on our applicant packet. I'm looking at it.
It is? Okay, so let me just go back and, oh, here we go.
Yeah.
This one?
So
which one do you want? Sorry.
Just zoom up right there.
Okay. Cross section on page 2.
The cross section. So I'm going to stand up. Hopefully they can. So my thought is just catching these little edges so you're not climbing the hill so hard with a 2 to 4 foot wall. Just, I don't know.
So go part way up that thing and then just put a wall there.
And then you just mitigate it so that the ditch isn't blocked, but also just, I don't know.
That's a good thought. It would mitigate a lot of that. You're right.
And that's just thoughts on certain areas. And
are you familiar if there's going to be any blasting on this side? I didn't read in the packet where it ever. Is that something that?
I don't think there would be any blasting. We're not anticipating any
just
blasting
excavating.
Anyway. Yeah.
That changes things a little bit too. I mean, if you can keep it in its stable nature, natural environment, then it's better than disrupting it. So
Not fracturing the underlying, right? We could make that a condition as well, right?
Any additional questions for staff or applicant? Anybody want to make a motion?
Mayor, I'll make a motion. I really wanted to hear what the council's thoughts were on the slope. That's really what I want to hear, and I think that I'll just take a shot and see where it goes. Okay. Anyway, I'll make a motion to approve the preliminary plat for North Rim Farms, located approximately 300 east, 400 south, with the conditions that the slope be a 1-to-2 slope, and that any vertical walls that can mitigate, and I don't know how to word this, I'm sorry, mitigate rockfall, that they be considered as well. So there's the shot.
So on that, my concern is that it'll just go up the hill farther. So if we're going up the hill farther, then it just causes more of a scar.
It does.
One thing that I'm looking at is a max height, because we didn't go through hillside, and so we want to hide these scars behind the houses. So I would like to see a max height from the pad lot on the contour going up with the slope. But maybe, Rick, can you tell us why they want to do a 1-to-1, like how that helps with the rockfall?
Mayor, I'm going to withdraw my motion.
Okay. Motion to withdraw.
No, you're good. We need to discuss it more.
Yeah.
So the story that I'm getting from Wayne is that as the rock tumbles down the hill, assuming we have rock falls coming down the hill, right, it has a higher probability of taking a bounce on a flatter slope and going over the berm than if it's on that steep slope going down. It just has a higher probability of catching it, and that's why.
I don't know, I get, yeah, Mr. Ellerman, we may come back with the same result if it went to Hillside, but at least there would be a scrutiny by some professional people there that I would certainly have felt comfortable with, more comfortable with, because I totally get what Mr. Rogers is saying about steeper slope and needing that, but and then same thing with the 2-to-1 slope. I mean, there are things that probably could be done there that might be different, but here we are trying to figure out a design for something that we could have had a lot more input by some professional people, in my view, with a Hillside review visit on it.
Councilman Bundy, I totally agree. And even if the Hillside Committee would just provide some technical information, then we could probably make a judgment. But again, depending on this, the catchment, if it's steeper, the rocks are they going to bed in the berm better than a gentler slope that would bounce them over? I mean, it really depends on, in every situation, depends on what the circumstances are. How big is the piece that breaks off? How, is it flats? Is it sliders? Is it tumble? I mean, what we're trying to do is create the best environment for both. And it's hard to find that balance. It really is. And I don't want to not discussed this to the point where the future homeowners there can sleep well at night, you know? And so that's why I'm kind of stuck on this agenda item. I don't know exactly the best way. Even after looking at the site yesterday morning, I'm with Councilman Coates. I don't like a SCAR, and so I've traditionally liked the 1-to-1 cut, but you know, 2-to-1 grants a gentler slope, but it creates a bigger cut, and you really don't know which is going to catch the most rocks. You really don't. I mean, you could have rocks jump those berms regardless of the cut slope and the design of the berm, and so it's.
But I'm also concerned about the drainage on a 1-to-1, because now I see the drainage as more of a problem than the rock fall. I mean, we're going to get a random rock fall, and I'm assuming you have a rock fall study if we went to this length.
Yeah, that's what Drew was showing in the beginning.
Oh, well, that's the geotech. Yeah. Okay.
And I'm assuming you're talking about when you say the drainage, you mean the erosion coming off a 1-to-1 versus a 2-to-1.
Because you're coming down at a 2-to-1 or 3-to-1. I don't know what the existing slope is, and then all of a sudden it's dropping off. We're going to erode all the way along that top edge.
Yeah.
And so
it speeds up the velocities.
So
and more erosion.
And I know we're at preliminary plat stage, right? We're not into that next level, but those are my concerns with that 1-to-1. And so I'm going to make a motion that we table this item to the next meeting until we can get some further analysis from the hillside and maybe some variations on how do we affect that slope, adjust that slope along that edge, have some 1-to-1, do 2-to-1s where you can, throw in some rock walls to help mitigate some of those knobs kind of areas. That's kind of my recommendation. I think we can get there. I just kind of hung up on that one.
Councilman Coates, if I may I know you said next meeting, but we may not be able to get the group together. It's because they're a random group that aren't just.
Next available meeting when we have.
Okay, I just want to say that because I don't want to be stuck to next meeting, then we have to table it. Just so if we can do, you know, the good thing is we have a couple of items that people are trying to get applications in to go. So we're going to get that group together. We'll just throw this one in. So you're kind of lucky that we're there because I think we're gathering them together sometime. I just don't know the date yet, and we'll slip this one in there and get it, you know, just have them go to this location too, and the two others that are possibly coming in, and get what their thoughts and impressions are, and invitations will go out.
And if you're proposing the 1-to-1, your mitigation on that backside that you said that your client was willing to proceed with on that in the areas that you feel is justified.
Okay.
So.
And if we could even get an idea of what, I know that we've got some estimates of the cut slope, what the heights are. It would really be helpful to have kind of a visual on if there's any way to create any kind of a 3D that can show kind of so that we can have that impression what those would look like, or if they would be covered up by the homes built in front, or what it would, because I can't get the elevations in my head.
Are you talking about like a street view?
Yeah.
So the way I look at it, Councilman Ivy, sorry, Roger, is that the houses are, if they're 1 story, they're going to be in the 20 to 25 foot, and then the 2 could go up to 35 per our ordinance. So in that range is where I'd want
it would fall. It just helps to, in the approval process, just to see it, so you can engage the question a little better.
I guess for me too, you know, multiple cross sections along there, that one that shows the 1-to-1, one that shows the 2-to-1, you know, whatever's going to happen, so that we can actually see, at least for me, I could see a little more of what's going to happen there. But again, I think the hillside review would give me a lot of comfort, because I know there are going to be some people there that are looking, and they're going to be on site, right? They go on site, and there will be a lot of questions asked, and I'd feel a whole lot better about that. So you've made a motion. Is it clear enough for you? We're good to go with that?
My motion is to table it to the next available meeting where the applicant be prepared with the items we've requested.
I second that motion.
Yeah, I have a motion and a second. Roll call vote.
Bundy, aye.
Coates, aye.
Ivy, aye. And Mayor, I'd just make one suggestion. I think one snag that we've had with Hillside in the past is that we get the thumbs up or thumbs down. I realize it takes time and money to write those reports. Maybe the city needs to invest in getting a report back rather than just a thumbs up or thumbs down, something that's brief and, you know,
We just need their recommendations of what was discussed in the meetings.
We do, but we also have, a lot of times in council, questions come up that maybe a short analysis of the meeting would work. And I realize it takes money. People can go write it. It's a process, but just something to consider going forward, because it seems like that this has been an issue on several agenda items. And I hate to hold up developers and engineers, and really we're just trying to do our due diligence and making the best decision.
So your suggestion is just kind of a synopsis of their meeting and their recommendation, right? I mean, that's simple enough. Sorry, go ahead. No.
Yes, Councilman Bundy, just something that you would add to our packet that's a very brief synopsis of the on-site meet and whatever technical data needs to be included. I think that would go a long way in helping the council to make informed decisions. I just think it would help even on your side, because we know you're great professionals. You're great at your job. It's just hard to make assessments from this chair when it's really field work that decides, how it should go.
Okay. Thank you for your time, guys.
Thank you. That is tabled. Move on to item 9, preliminary plat amendment. Continuation of consideration to approve a preliminary plat amendment for Finley Farms located approximately 300 East, 4300 South. Applicant Bright Ideas REI LLC.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. This item was also tabled on September 22nd to give the applicant time to update the hillside cross-section detailing the berm rockfall catch guard that is located at the bottom of the hillside, which is found in Figure 2 and Section A. The applicant has also identified access to service the rockfall catch basin, which can be found to the rear of Lot 94. The applicant has made these modifications and is ready, asking for approval at this time, and we're ready to answer any questions you may have at this time.
So this is the same hillside. I think we have the same, in my opinion, the same recommendations on looking at that. This one doesn't seem to have as many high knobs on it, looking at the contours on the one-to-one, but I guess we'll ask the applicant how he wants to.
I guess, oh, sorry. My name is Adam Allen, American Land Consulting. Sorry, I was just coming forward in case you guys did have some questions. I don't know, as it sits right now, we're in the middle of doing construction and all that stuff as it is. And our main question is, can we change the phasing to help accommodate the NRCS line? And also we were trying to remove those 4 lots to make sure that they conform in the future with the other stuff. Right, with the new zoning that we're trying to come forward on. So, I mean, I guess I don't have. I guess my question is, I guess I don't know where to go with it.
Because later in our agenda, you have a zone change.
Right.
As part of this.
Yes, because there is those 4 lots that are not currently in conformance.
That's on the agenda to get it in conformance, right?
Yes, it is.
So if those conform, do you need this?
I mean, we'd like to change the phasing, but that's probably between the phasing, just because of the NRCS being a weird deal, right? We're gonna have a bunch of stuff out there that's ready to be sold that's just gonna sit there, if not. But yeah.
Is this the correct proposal you have right here? This one?
So
it's changed. Okay.
I mean, our cut is significantly, well, I'd say significant, our cut is less, and we're trying to stay below where it's pretty much already been disturbed as it is.
What's your highest sorry, your highest distance from your pad to your top cut slope? Do you know that offhand?
I don't. I think it's under 25 feet, but if you go to that, scroll up to that cross section. Oh, down one, sorry. Right, nope, up next. Right at the bottom of that page that you're looking at.
Okay.
We can probably determine roughly what it is, because it's pretty much the same throughout there.
Yes.
As max as I can go in.
What was that, Drew?
So 2705.
That's as close as I can go in for you, but you guys
So
probably-
25 to
Oh,
30
we
feet
got it.
is where we'll be at on our max cut height.
So on your profile, you don't show that you're gonna to line the edge of that rock fall with gun height or.
So we're lining the inside edge, but according to what Wayne has perpetrated, the majority of that is going to be in bedrock or very stable soils, or very stable conglomerate. I don't know. I didn't personally do all the tests, right? I read through the stuff and took his recommendation of what it was.
So the closer you get to the base, the better bedrock you're going to have.
Yeah. And so, and again, I don't, as I said, I don't know all the ins and outs of it, but my understanding was from, and I know that there's may or may not have been what was said or what not was said, but since we're staying below where it was already disturbed to a point, right? There's already a road cut there. There's already some slopes and stuff cut into that hill.
Councilman Coates, when I go to page 1, they are showing the gunite face on that, on this.
Yeah, on the steeper
They've
side,
added
there's
this.
the gunite face, right? That the rock will come down and hit into, but not on the one-to-one.
Oh, there it is. So what's your average wall height on the lot side, on the berm side?
It's 8 to 10 feet tall.
8 to 10 feet.
Yeah.
So for what it's worth, 10 feet of that hillside's going to be covered with rock.
Yeah, this. And we talked about, is this the same agenda item where we discussed about how you clean out the rockfall berm and all that?
Yeah, and talking through it with Wayne a little bit and talking through it and looking at it ourselves, I mean, we anticipate there not being a ton of debris down in there, so our thoughts are they could get in there and manually clean it as long as they continue an effort to do that, right? If there is a bigger slide, then again, they would have to get into somebody's backyard with like a track hoe or something. But we don't see an issue with there being manual cleaning with like a wheelbarrow and some shovels, or we're gonna line that stuff in the bottom there.
How are you going to mitigate the drainage? Same.
So it is currently graded to drain out both sides of it and try to catch it at our lot line and take it out.
Both sides or both ends?
Sorry, both ends of where it ends.
My question is the sediment that's going to end up in the bottom of your ditch.
Right, and now we'll have to have them go in there and clean it out like any other ditch.
It's feasible or possible that if you don't have a lot of, soil or rock soil that's moving, it may stay fairly clean. But, this one I have a little, and I don't want to compare agenda items. I know that's not what we do, but
it's the same hillside.
It is. It's just it's not as steep.
It's not as steep. But my question is, are we saying we have to have the geotech, I guess, is saying we have to have this rock fall protection?
Yes.
Yeah.
That was, he wants the rockfall protection. Now, I don't know what the odds of an actual rockfall are, but yeah.
I think the problem with this formation, it's more the outcrops, that is extending out that, like I said, it's a conglomerate, conglomerate, and you know, in essence, it's a fairly stable, it's not, I mean, it's really not, you know, from my understanding, it's not something that would be known for Rock Falls. I said that before, but
I think it's more the stuff, to me, when I was out there looking at it, because I went out and looked at it, it seems like there's some stuff kind of at the top that might.
yeah, the
looks like it
outcropping
might,
that's sticking
yeah,
out. It
roll
doesn't
down
have-
the hill or something.
Doesn't have under support from underneath.
Right. Right. Yeah, and so, I mean, we are trying to obviously keep everything above that existing road there as dedicated open space hillside and not, you know, try to be too tall.
You know, I just in a way of conversation, council, where we're having the hillside committee meeting out there on the other agenda item, what would be the thought regarding having them look at this as well and move the, or if, and that's just a thought that if they're going to be there, it might be helpful to get two for the price of one.
My view is that yeah, it may not be quite as high, but it is the same slope. It's the same issues all the way around, and that would be my view, is that it probably ought to be looked at as well. You know, the hillside review is not only for the stability of the slopes, but also that visual, what's going to be seen. And that would be a time when it could be conveyed as to what will be seen from a distance, you know.
Good
Homes,
point.
if the home's covered, great. But we don't know that right now, for sure. So I'm the frame of mind that it ought to be the same as the other one, not trying to compare them, but it is the same slope, it's the same type of issues. So.
Want to make a motion?
Mayor, I think I would make a motion that we table this item for the reasons of having the hillside committee weigh in on it and hopefully provide some data and information that will help us make a more informed decision. And that would be tabled to the 27th if possible.
Just
Or the
say
next available.
say the next available meeting.
Next available
Next
meeting.
available meeting, Bundy second.
I have a motion and a second. Roll call vote.
Bundy, aye.
Coates, aye.
IVI.
All right, we're tabling that one also. Move on to our public hearings, item 10, item A of 10. Public hearing for consideration to approve a zone change request, C-21-17, from residential agricultural 1 acre minimum RA1 to single family residential 10,000 square foot minimum R110s located approximately 300 East, 4500 South, applicant Bright Ideas, REI LLC.
Mayor, may I have a point of order, please?
Yes.
I notice on here that we have their public hearings, and then we have consideration to approve. I guess I'm just a little bit, maybe I'm out of the loop. I don't know. I thought we would have a 2-week holdover. But if we, I guess I'm looking for clarification.
Yeah, this is something that I put in for this one just because we have so many things that we're holding over that we're a little concerned we're going to load these meetings up. So the question is, if it's nothing that you feel like you need to hold over, you actually have that option. But if not, the council could absolutely move to table it and take the 2 weeks. But, you know, we're pushing off a lot of items and sometimes they just don't have.
And I totally agree with that.
But that's why it's.
I would just say that if we do have something that we want to table, that we don't close the public hearing, because there is discussions that carry on after the closing of the public hearings when we do wait the 2 weeks. Council Segmiller, does that jive with the law?
I think the council can make that election, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And I think that's one of the questions with the 2 week holdover is that it kind of creates that additional public comment time. That's been at least one of the concerns.
All right, Drew.
Go ahead. Applicant is requesting approval to change the zoning of approximately 2.09 acres. This is actually the piece we just talked about here a few minutes ago, these 4 lots. So the request to change is from the current residential agricultural 1 acre minimum, or the RA1 zoning district, to the proposed single family residential 10,000 square foot minimum, or the R110 zoning designation. The R110 request is for the purpose of developing the 2.09 acres and incorporating it into the Finley Farm subdivision project, which borders on the east of this particular location. This area is general planned as a low-density residential designation. Within the low density is the R110 and R112 zoning districts, so this fits that. The surrounding zoning to this parcel is RA1 to the north and R1 and to the west, with R110 to the east and then St. George City zoning to the south. Staff has no concerns with the proposed zone change as outlined, since it conforms with the general plan and surrounding zoning to at least the east on that project. The Planning Commission reviewed this request at a public hearing on September 15th, 2021. The Planning Commission unanimously recommended approval of Z-21-17 for this zone change request from RA1 to the proposed R110, and that is on to you, the City Council, based on the findings in the report. I'll be glad to answer any questions the council has on Z-21-17.
I don't know that I have any questions on this item.
No, I don't.
No questions?
No.
Okay, this is a public hearing. We had public comment was accepted and reviewed on washingtoncity.org/meetings. Were there any comments, Chair, regarding this project?
We did not receive any public comments on this item.
Thank you. Any in the audience that have any comments or concerns on this project? If not, I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved, Mayor.
Bundy, second.
Roll call vote.
Bundy, aye.
Coates, aye.
Ivy, aye.
All right, thank you. We'll move on to item B, consideration to approve.
Mayor, just real quickly, if I may, on
Yes.
Council Ivy's question previously. So with that motion and the passage, the public hearing on that item is closed. Whether the council wants to have a holdover period or not would be independent of that public hearing.
Okay.
And would you motion that?
For what, the holdover?
Or would you just want to make that
You would,
comment before the?
on the
before
ordinance,
it
you
was
would
closed?
just, on the passage, you would just say, we don't want to consider this yet.
Okay, thank you.
So we can move on, correct? Okay. Consideration to approve an ordinance adopting zone change request, Z-21-17, from residential agricultural 1 acre RA single family residence to single family residential 10,000 square foot R110 located approximately 300 east, 4500 south.
Mayor, I can make a motion to approve an ordinance adopting zone change request Z-21-17 from residential ag 1 acre to single family residential 10,000 square foot located 300 east, 4500 south.
Second by Coates.
Thank you. I have a motion and a second. Roll call vote.
Bundy, aye.
Coates, aye.
Ivy, aye.
Thank you. That is approved. Move on to item C, public hearing for consideration to approve zone change request Z-21-18 to change from agricultural 20 acre minimum and residential agricultural half acre minimum, A20 and RA1 half, to single family residential 12,000 square foot minimum R112 located approximately 2700 South Washington Fields Road. Applicant Stephen Simister.
Thank you, Mayor. Stated applicants request an approval to change the zoning of approximately 30.0 acres. The requested change is, as stated by the mayor, from the RA residential agricultural half acre minimum and it has two zones in it, ag 20 acre minimum zoning designations to the proposed single family residential 12,000 square foot minimum zoning designation. The requested R112 is for the purpose of developing the 30.0 acres into future residential subdivision. This particular location has a general plan use designation of low density residential, again allowing for the R110 and R112 zoning districts. The surrounding zoning to this parcel is R115 to the north, R110 to the east, R112 to the south, and RA half to the west, quite a variety around it. So Staff has no concerns with this proposed zone change as outlined due to its conformance with the general plan. The Planning Commission reviewed this request at their September 15th, 2021 meeting. The Planning Commission unanimously recommended approval of Z-21-18 for the zone change request from residential half-acre minimum and Ag 20 acre to the proposed single-family residential 12,000 square foot minimum, or referred to as the R112 zoning district, and this is on to you, the City Council, based on the findings in your report. And I'll be glad to answer any questions the council has on this proposed zone change.
Any questions, comments for the developer? Okay. Again, this was a public comment or a public hearing. We had public comment on washingtoncity.org/meetings. Tara, any comments?
No public comments were made on this item, Mayor.
Okay, again, this is a public hearing. Any of you in the audience that may have a question or comment on this project? Seeing none, I will entertain a motion to close this public hearing.
So made, Mayor.
Seconded by Bundy.
Roll
Seconded.
call vote.
Sorry. Bundy, aye.
Goats aye.
Ivy, aye.
All right, we'll move on to item, excuse me, item E, correct?
D.
D, excuse me. Consideration to approve an ordinance adopting zone change request Z-21-18 to change from agricultural 20 acre minimum, residential agricultural half acre minimum, A20 and RA 1/2, to single family residential 12,000 square foot minimum, R112 lots located approximately 2700 South Washington Fields Road. Applicant Stephen Simster.
Mayor, I'll make the motion that we approve the zone change request Z-21-18 from Ag 20 minimum to residential agricultural half acre.
Bundy, second.
Sorry, that we need to, it's a two zones, RA half and the Ag going to R112, sorry.
20 and a half going to two single family 12,000 square foot.
Seconded, updated.
Motion and a second. Roll call vote.
Bundy, aye.
Coates aye.
Ivy, aye.
All right, that's approved. We'll move on to item E, public hearing for consideration to approve zone change request Z-21-19 to change from residential agricultural half acre RA 1/2 to single family residence 15,000 square foot minimum R15, R115 located approximately Wild Horse Ridge and Camino Real. Same applicant, Stephen Simster.
As I get started, just to give you reference, the one we just did is a little northwest of this. This is southeast, so that piece up there is the one you just did, just for reference purposes. The applicant, as stated, is requesting a zone change of approximately 10.35 acres. The request is from, as stated, residential agricultural half acre zoning to the proposed single-family residential 15,000 square foot, or the R115 zoning designation. The request for the R115 is for the purpose, of course, of developing this into future residential subdivision. This particular location has a general plan use designation of very low density residential, which allows for the R115 zoning district. The surrounding zoning to the parcel is R110 to the north, R115 to the east, RA half to the south, and R112 and RA half to the west. Staff has, again, no concerns with this proposed zone change as it follows the general plan. The Planning Commission reviewed the request at their September 15th, 2021 meeting, and the Planning Commission unanimously recommended approval of Z-21-19 for the change from the request from RA half acre to the proposed R115 onto the City Council based on the findings in your report. And I'll be glad to answer any questions on this zone change as well.
I don't have a question, but I do have a comment. I would applaud the developer. The R115 is the right zone for this. It is. I like that. Thank you.
No discussion. Again, the public hearing. Tara, any online comments?
There were no comments on this item either, Mayor.
Thank you. Any in the audience that may have a comment on this project? If not, I will entertain a motion to close this public hearing.
So move, Mayor.
Bundy, second.
Roll call vote.
Bundy, aye.
Goats aye.
IVI.
Thank you. Move on to item F. Consideration to approve an ordinance adopting zone change request Z-21-19 to change from residential agricultural half acre minimum RA half to single family residential 15,000 square foot minimum R1 15 located approximately Wild Horse Ridge and Camino Real.
Mayor, I'll make the motion. We approve the zone change request from Z-21-19 from residential agricultural half acre minimum to single family residential 15,000 square foot R1 15.
I'll
Bundy,
second.
second.
that.
Oh, sorry.
We have a second by Councilman Ivy. Roll call vote.
Bundy, aye.
Goats aye.
IVI.
Thank you. That is approved. Move on to item G. Public hearing for consideration to approve zone change request Z-21-20 to change from residential from agricultural 20 acre minimum A20 to single family residential 15,000 square foot minimum R1 15 located approximately 3300 South Washington Fields Road. Applicant Justin Gee.
Thank you, Mayor, and that is not a misprint on your screen, just so you know, and we'll get into that in a little bit. I know it looks unusual, but the applicant's requesting to approve the approval to change the zoning of approximately 0.14 acres. The requested change is from the current zoning of agricultural 20 to the proposed single-family residential 15,000 square foot R115 zoning designation. This request purpose for is expanding the east boundary of the Stamson Estates subdivision 10 feet along all the backyard areas of lots 9, 10, 11, and 12. This particular location, general plan use designation of very low density residential, and again allowing for the R115 zoning district. The surrounding zoning to this parcel is A20 to the north, east, and south, and A20 and RA half zoning to the west. Staff has no concern with the proposed zone change. Again, it's in the very low density residential, so we're fine with that. And the Planning Commission reviewed the request at their September 15th, 2021 meeting. The Planning Commission unanimously recommended approval of Z-2120 for the zone change request from Ag 20 to the R115 zoning designation onto you, the City Council, and it's based on the findings in your report. Just to give you a brief history of why it's 10 feet.
Please.
And I hate to even bring this out, not to embarrass one of the particular 4 lots, I don't know which one it was, but put a swimming pool beyond the property line into the Staley's cornfield area. And so with that, they were too far enough along to move it. So they just one of them went and approached Ralph and said, would you sell us 10 feet? And Ralph said, I'll be glad to sell you 10 feet, I guess. And
10 feet
but he said
for the length of the
for the whole
development.
length of the 4 lots, which is, I think, appropriate. If I'm selling it, I would have probably done the same. So it's a 10-foot by 4 lot deep, but because a swimming pool, bless those swimming pools, ended up in the wrong place, and we're just here kind of expanding the subdivision by 10 feet. So
See how important surveying is, gentlemen?
yeah, these two guys are going, that would never happen on our watch, right? But,
Usually it's blamed on the surveyor for make that problem. But
so
not
that's
that they ever
why
do it.
sometimes it's good to know why, something like this comes, and it's fixing, this is an option I would have given them. I said, go, what I always do in my job, go to your neighbor, see if they'll sell you some feet, and sometimes that's an easier process, even if it costs you a little bit, but.
So I have to ask this, Drew. So I don't know what lot it is either, but was it mandatory that we do the full length of development, or could it have been just for that one lot?
It could have been just for that lot. It
So
really
these
could
are good
have.
neighbors here.
In fact, most of the time, I just tell them, go just for your lot. And sometimes if it fits, you don't even have to go the whole lot. You can go just enough around the pool to meet the setback. But it all depends on the person you're buying it from too. So sometimes that's, I'm not saying anything. It's just sometimes this ends up happening more so
They'll
than
be
not.
coming back for a plat amendment though, right? Final plat, they'll have to do a final plat amendment.
Yeah, well, technically they probably wouldn't, but we probably
No.
should make them.
Well, they should, because if they wanted a part of that 10 feet, a part of their lot.
Yeah, because they need to move the boundary, but we'll have to check because sometimes you can do boundary line, you know, you have a surveyor sitting next to you, so we can do a lot line adjustment on a boundary of a subdivision now.
Yeah, but usually it's not on the outer boundary.
No, it can be. I used to see the same thing, but we've checked, and Councilman Bundy and I have talked both with the recorder and the way the state laws read, we can do lot line of adjustments on a boundary.
If they can get that adjusted, that's great.
Okay,
And
I'm
make
just
the
letting you
process
know.
easier, yeah.
Yeah, so if you're wondering why it might not have come, we'll double check and verify. And we'll do the best thing that, you know, is easiest for everybody. And if it is done, we'll just do a lot line adjustment on it. But if not, we'll bring it back as an amendment.
So I just made a comment to the mayor and pounded his fist and said, that's work from the land use task force. That's just hot off the press from last year. So
yeah,
it's good work, right?
It is.
Thank you. Any additional questions from the council? Again, this is a public hearing. Tara, any online concerns?
No public comments on this one either, Mayor.
In a public hearing, any of you out there have a concern about 10 feet? Yeah.
If there are none, Councilman Bundy, I motion that we leave the public hearing.
So second by
I
Coates.
have a motion and a second to close the public hearing.
Bundy, aye.
Coates, aye.
Ivy, aye.
Thank you. Item H, consideration to approve an ordinance adopting zone change request Z-21-20 to change from agricultural 20-acre minimum A20 to single-family residential 15,000 square foot minimum R115 located approximately 3300 South Washington Fields Road.
So Mayor, I'm prepared to make a motion. Do I need to include that it was 1400s in that property? Or are we good to? I'll make a motion to approve an ordinance adopting zone change request Z21-20 to change from ag 20-acre minimum A20 to single-family residential 15,000 square foot minimum R115 located approximately 3300 South Washington Fields Road.
Second by Coates.
I have a motion and a second. Roll call.
Bundy, aye.
Coates, aye.
Ivy, aye.
Thank you. That is approved. We'll move on to item I, public hearing, consideration to approve a Washington City Power Department impact fee facility plan and impact fee study. Rick Hansen.
Mayor and council, thank you. This item is to approve the impact fee facility plan and the impact fee study that we talked about at the work session. I guess the main points there are, we recommend that based on the study, the residential impact fees go up by 13%. On a typical home, it's about $325, and the commercial would go down by 4%. If you have any other questions from previous, if not, we'll, if there's any other comments.
No questions. It's a public hearing. Again, we took comment online. Any comments, Tara?
No comments on this item, Mayor.
Okay. Any of you in the audience that would have a question or comment on this item? If not, I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
Mayor, I'll make that motion.
Bundy, second.
Motion and a second. Roll call vote.
Bundy, aye.
Coates, aye.
Ivy, aye.
Thank you. Item J, consideration to approve an ordinance adopting the Washington City Power Capital Facilities Plan, Impact Fee Facility Plan, and Impact Fee Study.
Mayor, I'll make the motion.
Councilman, before you make that motion, do you mind if I just make a comment? I apologize.
go for
I should
it.
have spoke before you. I just want to mention for those that are listening now in our workshop, we had Mark with Utility Financial Solutions, who's a consultant, and we followed state law in this analysis and these impact fee rates. So there was a process to it, and anyone that would like those documents or information, they'd be available here at City Hall. I know a lot of times when you talk about impact fee, you'd like to know that it's based on need, and I can tell you that this actually really is. So, thank you, Mayor.
I'll make, if we're done, and I agree with you, Councilman Ivy, thank you for saying that. I'll make a motion that we approve the ordinance adopting the Washington City Power Capital Facilities Plan impact fee and the impact fee study with the additional amount of, with the residential increase of 13% and the commercial of a decrease of 4% with a increase of $324 on average
Residential.
for residential.
Bundy, second.
I have a motion and a second. Roll call vote.
Bundy, aye.
Coates, aye.
IVI.
Thank you. That is approved. Item K, public hearing for consideration to approve a Washington City Public Safety Impact Fee Facility Plan and Impact Fee Study. Fire Chief Matt Evans.
Mayor, I don't know if any of the other councilmen, but I don't have any questions on this.
Okay.
So
Again, it's a public hearing. Tara, any comments online?
No comments online.
Thank you. How about from our audience out here? You want to talk public safety? You want to keep you safe?
We're for the police. I'll say that. For the police and fire, we're for them.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yep.
The only comment I have.
All right. Well, I'll entertain a motion to close that public hearing.
Bundy, go ahead. Bundy, close the session. Motions to close the session.
Second by Coates.
Roll call vote.
Bundy, aye.
Coates, aye.
IVI.
Thank you. And item
Mayor,
I.
just add the comment that the council considered all of these impact fees with the analysts and experts in your work session. So you spent time on them tonight.
Thank you for that. We'll move on to item I, consideration to approve an ordinance adopting the Washington City Public Safety Impact Fee Facilities Plan and Impact Fee Analysis.
Mayor, I'll make the motion that we approve the ordinance adopting the Washington City Public Safety Impact Fee Facilities Plan and Impact Fee Analysis.
Bundy, second.
I have a motion and a second. Again, roll call vote.
Bundy, aye.
Coates, aye.
IVI.
That is approved. Thank you. How you holding up? Good. All right, we'll move on. Item 11, design guidelines. Consideration to move forward with designing of the Washington Fields commercial guidelines. City Manager.
Well, this is another item that we discussed very briefly during our last work session. So really what we're looking for, we've talked at length about the design guidelines or starting a process for commercial design guidelines in the Washington Fields area. I think everybody's been able to review the proposal, and what we're looking for is just the nod to move forward with it. I don't need anything more than that, knowing that they would be here the second week in November. So anybody on the council, any other interested stakeholders in the community could reach out and we could make them a part of this process.
Mayor, I just have a comment before that nod's asked for. My question is and has been is that, first of all, I want to recognize that our city is great at their jobs. Our designers and our planners, they do a great job. And I think that what we're looking for here is maybe somebody that specializes in this area of expertise, and I understand that. I just wonder, and I'm going to ask the question, whether or not we want to move forward with these design standards before we have an opportunity to decide what those design standards should look like when it comes to the city. Now, I know it's going to be part of that process, but are we ready for this? That's what my question is that for me, I've been actually paying a lot of attention lately to design standards in other towns and did some Google searches. And we have a lot of historic importance here in Washington. Our heritage is vitally important. You can see the way this building's designed after the old rock school, and it creates that ambiance or feeling that is important to me and all of our residents and citizens. And so I would just ask the question that I have no problem with this, but I'm just wondering, are we putting the cart before the horse? Because we haven't had those conversations yet. And I want us as the elected officials to lead out on these design standards and be the driving force for them. So I would just ask that question. I don't know if now's the time. I can certainly go along with that, but I would actually, where, you know, the other two council members that are not here tonight, I would like to hear even their comments and what they're at. I know, I think I know where they're at, but This is a big step for our city. When you're talking design standards for the Washington Fields, and even getting some input back from people, and I know that's part of the process. But again, are we ready? Are we ready for that?
So I appreciate that, and Councilman Ivy, I think we're already behind, in my opinion. I think we need to get more going, and then get the council involved with that as well, and kind of work. That's how I see it, is that I have my ideas, but I'd like the professionals in the room to help feed off those ideas that we have. And so I think it's a good step forward to move forward on this. So that's kind of where I'm landing on this.
And the request on the agenda item tonight is not that you adopt standards, it's that you authorize the expenditure of funds to receive expert opinions and suggestions of design standards. And so you'd have a subsequent meeting, you'd be able to see the cross sections and the relief and all of the details. And in theory, the council could then decide whether they like what they see, modify it, ask for a different concept.
And I do understand it and understand that. But again, if we look back at the development of this group, at one time we owed them, like, I believe it was like $5,000 or $6,000. Now this is a different group than that.
Yeah, let me go back to a little bit of the history and why this is coming right now.
Then I would like to know why we hired a different group then.
Yeah. So if you remember, a process was started, I want to say 2019, to go down this road, but it wasn't specifically looking at commercial property design standards. It was looking at how the entire Fields area wanted to be developed from a city perspective. And when the Snow family came and asked for a rezoning of their property at 3650 and Fields Road, one of the big questions was, well, we never got we don't have the design standards. And at that point, the information that I got back from the city council was, we're not really that interested in designing the entire Fields area because most of it has already been developed. And so let's focus in on just the commercial piece at 3650 in Washington Fields, and let it spill over to maybe a few of the other pieces in the Fields area. And so that scope change necessitated a change in the group that we used, because it was a different, this group specifically does these type of projects. And so
and the investment from the city would be like $25,000.
$25,000
Is that where it is?
to get us to the end of phase 2 of this.
Well, as I said, I'm not against it. I just would also just make one last comment on this agenda item, and that is, are we at a point where we would want to entertain a design a group or committee, Mayor, to look at what these are, so that when they come, we're prepared and ready for those? I mean, as I said, this is, for me, it's vitally important, that represents what our city means to all of us. And I'm sure we'll get it right. It's just, and that's my only comment. And I'm not against this at all. I think the better information and expertise that we have will give a better product. But if we do approve this, I would just ask that we could maybe have a committee or a group that would join together and start to put some of these ideas together, so we're out ahead of this as well. That's my thought.
Yeah, so the end result that the council desires to publish will determine the process. If the council wants to approve and publish a design guidelines for commercial, yeah, we'd need a more detailed work group. Per Utah law, the council kind of is the design board, unless you want to get more specific than just reviewing the applications as they come. But on commercial, the city council has a lot of opportunity to work with the design and the look and the feel.
And council, what I was referring to more was that we would have buy-in and feedback from our citizens, our residents. So they have, I know where we're at, I'm just saying more time for them to look and understand what we're doing helps them to have more of a say in that process, because that's what drives us as elected officials, what our citizens want. So that's where I was going with that.
Yeah, I agree. It is a big step, and we do need to we need to give every consideration, and maybe a committee my recollection is we gave direction that we need to move forward with this, because we're going to have somebody else coming in, and we have no guidelines again, and it's been a little bit tense. And I'm just kind of a short timer here, but I know it started before my time, and my recollection is we gave the direction that we need to move forward to this, and I'm about moving forward even with that precaution. Councilman Ivy, I agree with you, but we do need to get this rolling.
And I'm good with that as well. I just wanted to make those comments, and I'm in agreement that to move along, it was just voicing those items
I
was what's
appreciate that.
important to me.
So with that, Mayor, I'll make a motion that we approve to move forward with the commercial design guidelines for the Washington Fields for the amount of 25,600.
Bundy, second.
A motion and a second, roll call vote.
Bundy, aye.
Coates, aye.
Do I aye or nod? Which is it? Aye.
Whatever you like. That is approved to move forward. Thank you. Item 12, anything to report from your assigned committees?
Mayor, just very quickly, I know this has been a long meeting. So the league has been very busy. It's kind of a new precedence being set that their meetings are coming more often and covering more information. And right now, the update, we've had some updated conversation on inclusionary zoning and some of those important topics to address generational housing in our city. And I can be glad, again, I would offer that invitation to anyone that would like to come and discuss what the league talks about or the land use task force is involved with right now. I would sit down and talk about those individually if you'd like. But what I'd mention, Mayor, is that they've just offered a new class that will be held December 11th for newly elected officials. I know that seems a little premature, but those that are running or they might want to just put that in their look. December 11th and January 8th is the elected officials essentials toolkit in Salt Lake, and then we have local officials day, January 19th. That's where the youth groups meet at the Capitol. And other than that, I don't believe I have anything else.
Thank you. Anyone else? Now we'll move on to the city manager report.
Well, based on some of the health conditions happening tonight, I'll go ahead and yield my time. And I would mention, I think we can move all the items from the closed session to the next meeting based on that and based on the fact that we're missing a couple council members, but that's my recommendation.
All right, thank you. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So made, Mayor.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. See you in 2 weeks. I'm sure I will. I totally appreciate where you're coming from.
You feel better.